Lights working, yay! And the thing's working. Oh, it's gone live. Good, great. Oh, great. So the system's actually working properly now. Yay, but that called me out. Hello, everyone. How are we doing? So just fixing things and updated all sorts of software. Those who are watching my Twitch stream today will notice that the camera paused or something at a weird point and all sorts of weird things happened. Well, that was thanks to the software being horrendously out of date on OBS. And, well, when I say OBS, actually not on OBSBot and OBS's links. And that caused all sorts of issues. I was on version 2.6 and they're now up to version 2.8 something. I was on 2.6.0 and they were up to version of 2.8.4. And I'm sort of going, that would explain why things went wrong. And yeah, sorting everything out. And then I told it to set up and go live, which normally means it goes live there, but doesn't go live till I press the blue button. And today I didn't need to press the blue button. OBS is working better than ever. I'm going to have to watch that one out. Oh, well, how are we all doing? How is everyone? Right then. I've got to get a certain thing going, because I do always get something going. Something which I consider very important. Make sure that's on the live chat. Make sure that's showing timestamps. That's good. And let's add the Q&A for Bruships. Which episode is this of Bruships? Oh my lord, it's Bruships 141. I am Pollard. And by the way, the Patreon vote for April 24 is live. Finally, after arguing with Patreon for a while. I love you all. You're all lovely people. But there are some notes in the Patreon about people who are trying to confuse me. Okay? I realize you are not doing this necessarily on purpose. At least it doesn't feel intentionally on purpose. But some of you, I think, are trying to torture me in cruel, unusual ways. Oh, that was fun. That was some fun. Yeah. So let me just say hello to everyone, and then I will get to my brew, and then I'll start answering questions. Hello! We've got M35 Benvids. Alright, let's see. How far can I go up on the question, on the people? I can go back to 713, so I can't go back to it earlier, so I do apologise to everyone who was early on that, because it's not letting me go there. Hello, Team Locker. Hello, Tenevelaka. Hello, Stafford. Hello, HMS Verdun. Hello, Dave Harrison. Hello, everyone. Yes, I know you're early, but I am running absolutely terribly late, and I do apologise again. I was arguing with Patreon, I was arguing with all sorts of things, and basically time got away from me. But the April 2024 Patreon vote is now live, and I will show that all to you in a second. It's going to be fun. It is going to be fun. Glowworm was psychotic. Yes, Glowworm was psychotic. Hello, Runon. Hello, Blackbird Maximus. Hello, Touch2 Vishel. Hello. Oh, Jacob. Hello. Hello, Budguy829. Hello, Duke of Petchington. Hello, Paul Amos. Hello, Mole's Revenge. Hello, John Shea. Hello, Leslie. Hello, Drakenred. Hello, Team Locker. So, if I just do this, and I open up this, and I bring that to a 4, and I go that. Yeah, and I open up the patron vote, and I go to here. I'm going to do let's see, stick that about here, and I'm going to go to properties for that, and I'm going to pick something else. Hello everyone. Right then, so if you are watching this, I'm going to just scroll down to this little section. Leslie, Steve, you're torturing me. I love you both. Your questions are wonderful. But slightly more information. And what if the Japanese Navy had built the destroyers that were used to cover Yamato and Musashi? What effect would that have had in World War II? I'm not sure that meant to build... The Japanese built destroyers instead of the battleships, or built destroyers equivalent to the battleships. It's one of the reasons why I chose this lovely picture down here for going underneath. And of course we have the French representatives from the Washington Naval Treaty. And some of you are already voting. That's just being some minor cruel and unusual punishment going on here. But yeah, it should be good. It's a very good set of questions. Multiple choice as always. You have 7 days left and you're able to vote multiple times. So if I give you an example, that means if I wanted to, I can vote for every single one. I do think that in the app that doesn't always count. And there were some questions which I'm going to answer while I'm here. Because during the questions, one of the questions which came up from someone was, what happens if a tie happens? Well, if a tie happens, let's say submarine aircraft carriers and Danny Wright's design the carriers of 7 Protos tied. If they're in first place, i.e. they get both of them gets more votes, more votes than anyone else combined, then they become the first two choices. However, let's say Lord Fisher's killed in an accident gets 16 votes, and each of these get 15. Then I would try and figure out a way to do 3. Okay? And that one's kind of an interesting one, because honestly, if Lord Fisher is replaced with Battenberg, and Battenberg stays in power for as well as he could do, there could be some very interesting things completed, because Battenberg was carrying on with the capital, with the battleships. He would have completed all 8 R-class. He would have completed... He would not have done Glorious, Furious, and Courageous. And he would have completed Agincourt. He would have completed the battleships. So that could be some really interesting history. For starters, me and Drac might not have a regular interesting argument about whether or not the HMS Agincourt, as being built at the Queen Elizabeth class, was going to have triple 15-inch guns and small troop boilers, or 6 18-inch guns in 3 twin turrets and small troop boilers. You notice we do agree it was going to have small troop boilers. Right then, let's sort out the questions. Go back to the questions. That should be okay, and do that. There you go. Ba-da-da-bum-bum-bum. Hello everyone. Okay, so let's see. I'm going to narrow this up a bit. That's better. It gives me a bit more spread. And allows me to spread out the live chat even more. How is everyone doing? Hello, everyone. Oh. Shameless book plug? That's not usually a shameless book plug in the Bruships videos. Draconite, good. Stop giving me a headache. Because when a Russian sorcerer points out the Soviet Union actually improved railroads by shortening various routes, it did work. The camera is following my hand. Yay. It's supposed to follow my hand. Oh, what's it on now? It's supposed to be giving me headroom. So, that's what it's supposed to be doing. Giving me headroom. Oh, it's fun. Actually, so would we not have? Would we have Henderson not going? This would. No, but you would have had a very interesting Washington Naval Treaty because let's be honest, if Agincourt is built and she's a 28-knot fast battleship with 18-inch guns, what do you think the Admiral class that comes next gets built like? Because do you think, with that sort of scenario, that Jellicoe and the rest of them build ships which look like battle cruisers or fast battleships? So could the Americans be dealing with the fact that there's Agincourt in the world and possibly 3 or 4 ships? Because let's be honest, fast battleships would not have to be built, would not be slowed up so much by Jutland's experience. If you're building a fast battleship rather than a battle cruiser, you know, you would actually carry on probably building, it wouldn't change as much. And if you're building a fast battleship armed with 8 18-inch guns, then turn around and the Royal Navy goes, so we've got 5 ships armed with 6 and 8 18-inch guns, which all do 28 plus knots and are in service. Washington Naval Treaty. You gonna say 16-inch gun limit? No. We can't. The Royal Navy have 5 18-inch guns. 28 knots. Okay. It just causes a minor panic. Oh. Yeah, why is my question so? I would just ask for the ideal model for ships in all classes running into both World War 1 and 2. For all nations, for all classes, for all nations is what you want. The ideal model for. Okay, I would need to not be. I would need to not have family around me while I wrote that one. So that one could be done, but it would preferably be done when I'm not in. When I've said fixing this house up for sale, or down building the new house. Okay, let's start off with the questions. Hello, Mega Scrow, by the way, before I get into it. Steve Richards, hello. Hello, Dope Squad. Hello, Jacob. Atros Villain, on a conventional layout, how much more wise does a 12-gun 16-16 African Challenge ship cost over a 9-gun 16? Okay, on a conventional layout, how much more percentage-wise does a 12-inch gun 16 cost over a 9-gun 16-16 African ship? Okay, so I'm going to actually do a video about the cost of ships because there are some serious misunderstandings about the cost of ships. So basically, what you are spending, the only difference cost-wise is going to be for that extra turret, the ammunition, and the hull shaping and hull shaping material and space you need for the crew, etc., and supporting them that goes around it. You will probably not need a bigger, more powerful engine. Believe it or not, you probably don't, because length to beam ratio, if you've got enough power to go so fast, if your length goes up but your beam doesn't, you will actually find yourself proportionally slimmer, so therefore you will probably have a slightly more efficient hull shape, and you probably don't need that much more, if any more, power. A good example I often give is look at the power, the shaft horsepower of the cruisers versus the battleships in the run up to World War Two, and look at the realities of them. The battleships require more power, not because they are bigger, longer, because they're fatter, and they're often not longer, and that's the big problem. If you're building something fat, you need to build something long. So basically, if I've got 12 16.5-inch guns versus 9 16.5-inch guns, or 16 16.5-inch guns, what's the percentage cost-wise? Well, your 9-gun 18-inch ship and your 9-gun 16 and a 16.5-inch ship are probably not going to be too dissimilar. There's going to be difference in costs in terms of you're going to have to scale it up a bit, but it's going to be pretty much similar. I wouldn't be surprised if the most expensive, but also possibly the most effective, is going to be the 16.5 to 12-gun ship. Because, quite simply, the 12-gun ship, especially if you're using the same engine, same you can probably get going faster. Leslie Mitchell, the budget for the MO2 assigned to DD build. That was what I was tempted to go with, but I wasn't sure from the phrasing of the question, Leslie. So, if you want to put that in again for May, I will make sure it goes in as that. Right then, Blackman Maximus, where is our musical intro? Howdy. Team Logan, how fierce does the resistance would have been if the IJN had tried to get rid of certain marsupials near Perth in World War II? Japan is not in a good place to support an invasion of Australia. Neither is Australia a good place to support an invasion of Japan. Australia is huge, vast distances which will swallow up troops. You need to bring tanks, armoured warfare capability with you to manoeuvre properly. You also have the reality that you can take one spot in Australia. Let's say you land and you do take Perth. So what? You're not any closer to taking Sydney. That is a long, long way away. Same with Darwin. And that is the real problem with taking it. When you're dealing with continental nations, i.e. nations which also double as continents, that's the real problem with them. Because you try to take them, you are going to end up needing a lot more troops. And taking Perth, etc., well, you're going to have to deal with Rottnest Island. You're going to have to deal with lots of firepower blasting away at you as you're trying to get in there. It's not going to be fun. And that's before you deal with the wildlife. And the thing is, we do have a fair amount of historical evidence that suggests that quite a large number of Japanese Army and Japanese Navy personnel who were sent in as reconnaissance teams to Australia disappeared. They would never seem to be recovered. And honestly, the Allies didn't even know they'd arrived. So pretty much it seems to most of us that the terrain of Australia, the flora, the fauna, and the wildlife inhabitants dealt with any invasions rather effectively, or rather the reconnaissance groups rather effectively. Robert Dennett, thank you. On your lunch break, so I'm glad I could drop in for a second. Curious, if they kept around Implacable Victorious, do you think it could have sort of supported F4s if fully rebuilt? Honestly, if they had skipped Victorious and gone straight to Implacable and Indefatigable, and gone straight to converting them, A, their hulls were in far better condition, so they'd been a lot cheaper to work through than Victorious, so they wouldn't have taken up all the money. And B, they do have slightly more hangar space, they could be slightly more easily configured. They could take F4s, potentially, but it's still going to be difficult. It's going to be a very tight operation. Dave Harrison. have you done a video on development of the Royal Navy radar for World War Two? Oh, good lord. I think I did do a video on Royal Navy radar. Goodness gracious me. Let me search across my channel for radar. Boy. No, that won't be it. I have no... I seem to remember doing it because I was discussing Sheffield. I was discussing all the different ships which had radar fitted in 1938-39 and what they're being used for and how that was affecting things. But I honestly cannot remember when I did it. That sounds terrible. That really does. Let me just go to my channel homepage. I might be able to find it if I search that way. View my channel. Okay, I'm sorry to say I've now to 1,600 videos, okay? I can't remember which one it's in. I know I've done it somewhere. Let me just check. I've overtaken Naval in number of videos! Oh, good God. Oh, good God. How did that happen? I just thought, hang on, if I've done that many, he must have done even more, and no, I've overtaken Drac in number of videos. I'm worried about that. You can all go and check the stats for yourselves on the channel homepages, but that worries me. Yeah, there might have been Warship 20 something discussions. Warship 22 could have been. Oh god, that's worrying. I've done more than my best mate that in terms of numbers of videos. I've been going less time than him. There are some really weird videos on my channel. And I do pull a lot of weird faces. This is not something I should have done. I should not have gone to this page. This is freaking me out. Oh my lord. I do so many videos. I should not do so many videos. Oh goodness gracious me. Look at all the shorts. Oh, there's me in hot tubs. Can I go back to my first ever short? What was it about? What was it like? What was it? Ah, the Anglo-German dreadnought race. Ah, that was a fun one a while back. God, I had more hair then. You know, by gum, that's worrying. Drac needs to buy you a beer, Ryan Brew, Robert Dennett. Oh, he does, in nicest way. I cannot state more how helpful the shipshape crew are being and how much they are prepared to do in terms of helping us move. Seriously, I think if they do any more, they'll be doing the moving rather than Bruships and the removal company. Aaron, just to ballpark how many years ago? About 2, I think. Yes, you did make a red rolling radar video. And it's connected to the riding concern. It's about 2 years ago. That's why alien invasion movies never happen in Australia. Look, in nicest way, an alien invasion of Australia would go very quickly. We would find the spiders inside whatever was left of the vehicles. And all the humans would be going, that's yours now. And that would begin the space-dwelling race of super arachnids that eventually ruled the galaxy. Oh, right. Henry Buffer, the Soviet Z plan for 15 battleships. How many could they have built by 1942-43 if Germany did not invade? Possibly. And I do say this as possibly. There is a chance that if the second 5-year plan is able to work, and the third 5-year plan goes as planned, then the Soviets could have had 2, maybe 3 in service. Most of those are going to be Baltic ones, though. Most of them will be Baltic ones. It's a really interesting thing when you start working through Soviet designs. And yeah, Stalin's battleships is always a fun one. Because Stalin getting his dream fleet is... That's an interesting one. That was an entire video, of course, Stalin getting his dream fleet, and... The really interesting thing with the Stalin getting his dream fleet is if they'd started Project 21 ships in about 1930-34. If they started with those ships, which were basically enhanced Nelrods. When I say enhanced, I mean that with absolute hubris. And that was actually one of the that was a Ruon proposed patron suggestion. If he got that started in 1930-35 because of, let's say, a London Naval Treaty, oh good lord, that's going to be fun for the Germans to deal with. You could have 2 or 3 of those in service, or maybe even 4 or 5. Paul Beswick, what's the ETA for Bill Trump's 125? Me screaming at the computer, but it's slowly getting done. And honestly, the next Bill Trump's recorded after that will be recorded soon and will be put up. If the Type 12M Rothsey class frigates were full... Well, 1981, that's probably going to be the if they're replacing the torpedo troops. Historically, if I remember correctly, with the Rothsey class, no, I want the Rothsey class, not the Rothsey Classic, because I want a picture. Because I wanted to have a quick look at a picture. So not there. Why do I have pictures of the Rothsey Classic on it? I'm not even getting into that. I'm not getting into that. Historically, they got a Sea Cat. And so I wouldn't be surprised if they did. Again. They didn't actually... Some of them never actually had the torpedoes fitted, it seems. Let's have a look at Yarmouth. Yeah, Sea Cat launcher, Limbo mortar. So probably they get another Sea Cat launcher, honestly. If they're bigger, though, they might actually have more space. And honestly, they might actually have a better hangar space for them as well. They were good little ships. I'm going to use this picture of HMS Yarmouth. Just to illustrate what we're talking about. Ba-ba-da-bing. So, HMS Yarmouth should appear here. Oh, you won't. There you go, there's a Rosse class. And yeah, probably they just have more Sea Cat launchers. Probably. Let's be honest. If you've got more tonnage to spare with, you might have actually fitted them the torpedoes in the first place, but you might actually just give them more of the anti-submarine capability, or more of whatever you want to build them with. Blabber Maximus, what changes to my Patreon suggestion, IJN carries a knight, is needed to make it make on a Patreon vote? Honestly, it was massively long, and you had not just the carriers changing, you also had Yamato Musashi. And the thing was, it wouldn't fit in. I tried to fit it in a few times, and it wouldn't fit. I was trying to figure out how to shorten it to fit it in. The trouble is, the actual box is roughly 150 characters long. Okay, it is not that long, the actual box question. So I don't mind. You give me the full questions. That's great. But your full question is, the IJN carries a knight. Japan develops aircraft carrier night strike doctrine on par with the 1939 Royal Navy, with the tight search ban for returning aircraft, and builds the Yamato class as carriers of a similar tonnage to the battleship version, with Taiho being an improved design alongside Shinano. Okay, so you've entered in not just Knight Doctrine, you want me to change the Yamato class into carriers, which is going to change the parameters of Pearl Harbor, going to change the participants of Pearl Harbor, going to change a lot of their activities in terms of some of the naval aviation fights, because it's going to change what's probably available and what's probably being sent. But also you're changing quite a lot of doctrine for the Japanese. So if they're not building Yamatos as battleships, they're building as aircraft carriers. What are they building? Are they building battleships instead? Are they also building their heavy cruisers? Because they've now got a lot of armor, a lot of other stuff not being used. So basically, the trouble is the question, by how you've got 3 different diversions from history, 3 different divergents. So it diverts A, and then it goes route B, and then it goes route C along there, and it's just so long to put it into the question. That's it. And I was sitting there looking at it going, I kept trying to work out how to make a shrunken version which would fit within the question length, but would also still be of the same character and the same spirit, and I couldn't get it to work. So that's why I didn't go in. Mega sorry, cruel and unusual you say. What about an all-aft main gun layout for a battleship, like Rickloo, but moving forwards? The Americans did look at that, and they voted against it, because the theory behind it is lovely. The practice is terrible, because you do not want your strongest firepower to be your aft coverage. You want it forward, because you want to be pointing towards the enemy, not always running from the enemy. The trouble is, it's national image. If your guns are all located on your rear, it looks like you're always preparing to run away. And there's a great sci-fi drama which was on YouTube, which was about those who run. And the thing was, it was a misinterpretation by the aliens of what the humans have put forward, which was those who chase. And there's a very big connotation difference between those who run versus those who chase. Those who chase, it's scary. It's got an intimidation factor. Not a nasty one, but it's got a strength there. Those who run. Steve Richards, who had the better career, HMS Starling or USS England? I'd say Starling, but that's purely because of some of the stuff she gets up to. I would say both are equally excellent ships in terms of their anti-submarine warfare doctrine, but some of the things Starling gets up to outside of the anti-submarine warfare are why I would say she has a slightly better career. No. 150 character limit, Blackburn Maximus. 150 character, not 150 word. There is a difference there. Oh. Actually, just go and find the link for the longest question. Type it out. Remember, I have to stick your name in because that's the form we go with. So it's got to have your name. It's colon da da da. Because I always put the name in so people get credit. Because I'm an academic, so we're obsessed with credit. Because we don't actually get paid money, we get paid in credit. I was watching, when I was watching, I found myself listening to Dave Ramsey. Which is not unusual, because if you have YouTube on in the background while you're working, it will go through certain things. And one of the things I tend to go down the question-answer current affairs videos on YouTube, because I don't like to watch the news on television a lot, because it gets so filtered. It gets so overanalyzed, and I hear them on the fence, and I go, I just want the data. I don't want anything else. I just want the facts. Thank you, because I do the analysis for a living, and your analysis is wrong, because you have 5 minutes to prep before you do this, and as smart as you are, you can't prep for talking about this defense and foreign policy in 5 minutes. And you won't be able to know the full context and full ramifications. So if I listen to you, I'm just going to think you're an idiot, and I know you're not an idiot. I know you worked very hard, and I say this because I know a lot of people who are in the press, and they do work very hard, and they do try their best. But the thing is, they get 5 minutes to prep, and then they have to discuss a story in about 2 minutes on air, and it's a very minimal approach because their time is so limited. This is why I don't like 24-hour news. But yeah, so it goes through, and Dave Ramsey's on there. And I was listening to him talk to someone, and someone was going, I have $200,000 in debt, and I'm earning 50 grand a year as a tenure track lecturer. And I was going, that does fit. That does fit. He's going, that's terrible. I was going, yeah. Luckily, I was sponsored through my PhD and sponsored through my bachelor's, so my master's, and I've got my bachelor's, but in the UK, that for me, I went through in the year when it was only $3 grand a year for your fees. So I've got about, including interest, about 11 grand, and that gets taken automatically from my paycheck as sort of an extra form of tax. If I won the lottery, I'd pay that off, but short of that, I'm just going to ignore or leave it there. But I was listening to them going, yeah, you're right, Dave. It is a bit of a but it's also, it does make it does. It's how they charge. Universities are a bit of a racket in some regards. I could get me in trouble. Some universities. Let's put it this way. I have strong opinions on how some universities, I'm not associated with any like that, but some universities approach recruitment of PhD students, because they promise them massive careers. One of the things when I did my PhD was I had a frank discussion with actually Prof. Lambert, but also, which was basically along the lines of, you do realise, we have roughly 4 PhDs going through this program at any one time, and of those, about 1, if they're lucky, will get a job lecturing in the UK, because so many universities are not employing naval historians. And I went, yeah, I understand this. You do realise it's not a guaranteed job at the end. Yes, I understand it. but I was being sponsored, and also I did kid myself that I would be the one in the 4. I do admit that. And he's right, they're right. Although none of my year group, none of my batch have got jobs lecturing in the UK. I'm the closest with contract lecturing. One's teaching in America at Annapolis. One is teaching in South Korea, and the other one doesn't do academia. Does something else. We still keep in touch. Yeah, they're good. They're nice people. And the ones below me, Richard is quite well known. Richard Dunley. He's off in Australia. The King's Naval History PhDs, War Studies PhDs, they go off and teach around the world. They don't end up in the UK teaching in the UK because there just aren't the jobs. And I wouldn't do. I've been offered jobs abroad, but I don't go because all the family and issues and things I have. You know, it just doesn't make sense to leave them. Not permanently. I don't mind travelling off and doing contract lecturing and doing short-term lectures, but going off permanently and going to the other side of the world, yeah, they would have been completely around. They're going to be slightly better off down in Cornwall, but I still probably wouldn't do it. In fact, I definitely wouldn't do it. Right on. Acknowledging the Normandies were crippled by A, being French-built, and B, World War II. Could they have been fitted with turbo-electric drives, and would this have been a more effective solution? Almost anything would have been a better solution than what they were. The Normandies, the idea of... Well, I presume it's World War I. Normandies, the idea that... Let's put it this way. The Burn is a classic example of... We're going to fit it with both turbines and triple expansion engines. If you'd gone with some sort of... Here's the thing. If you'd gone with a turbo-electric drive system for all that, and so the turbines came on to provide high power and the triple expansion provided range, that would almost be a more efficient system. Almost be a more efficient system. But honestly, the main question I'd be asking you is why the frigate do you not have diesel engines connected into that system instead of triple expansion? Because if you want a long range, you can use the diesel. Right, so in question 2. As you missed this one last week, I think I answered about 30 odd of your questions last week, so if I missed one, I'm going to take that as good times. How troll capable would the Type 12 frigate fan be if they were tons bigger than they were? Well, as you can see, they are a cute vessel. The main advantage is when you add size onto something is you make it better performance in rougher weather and deeper seas. So that's an advantage. The other advantage you can add to it, and that's important, is the range of weaponry. So basically, the bigger you make it, the more space you have for personnel, the more space you have for additions later, and you have a greater variety of weaponry. So what you could have seen, this is something if they're bigger, they could have ended up with having Exocets and Sea Cats and Limbo put on them. Because they could be replacing more than just what they have. So that's the advantage. Larger ships tend to be more flexible. The hull is more flexible in terms of space and adaptation. Jacob, 3K, I paid 1K a month to my... Yeah. What was annoying was mine was the first year they did that. If I'd been 1 year earlier, I could have gone through for free. So annoying. A few years later, though, and it would have been a lot more expensive. It's now 9K a year. So basically, what it cost me for 3 years of university, it now costs people for a year. Excellent, Black Belt Maximus. Um, Ethan Yang, hello. How do you think the Imperial Austro-Hungarian Navy would have developed had the Habsburg monarchy survived World War One? If Austro-Hungary had survived World War One, it depends. If they are restricted similarly as Germany, you could see something like the Panzerschief appear. And that could cause real fun for any Anschluss. Because the thing is, if the Austro-Hungarian monarchy survives World War One, and they survive with a navy, etc., and they have their own independent treaty allowance of ships, so if they have something like the Deutschland class, etc., the thing is, Anschluss, i.e. the joining of Austria and Germany together, will be that much more problematic as far as the rest of Europe is concerned, because that will be doubling their naval capacity and doubling their access to the sea and giving the Germans direct access to the Mediterranean. So the scenario is not very good. If they do survive, then yeah, it's probably something like that. They probably end up facing a treaty like the Germans had, but that was one of the things. The Italians were quite keen on the Austro-Hungarians being broken up, and the Austro-Hungarian constituents were quite keen on them being broken up, which is why they get broken up by the Treaty of Versailles, pretty much. Well, we're using the Treaty of Versailles as a catch-all for all the treaties around the end of World War I at this point. But, yeah, it's one of those interesting things. If you could... the amount of people who've come back to me and gone, actually, breaking up Germany at the end of World War I, that changes so many things. And I go, yeah, if the French had actually been allowed to be a little bit harsher, might have, if Wilson hadn't been quite so keen on moderation, or if the Russians had survived and been part of that negotiation and Germany been broken up, World War II would have been very different. Black Masters, a little early scenario, but it's the Japanese impact. You're going to have angled flight decks in World War II during the war. I mean, if the Japanese have jet engines earlier, you are going to have angled flight decks earlier during the war. And, yeah, it's going to be fun. It'll be interesting. The Americans will probably lose a lot more ships to kamikaze strikes. Because infrastructure-wise, things are still going to bear out the same way. But the Japanese are going to have a lot more capability to chuck into the battle. All 4 Audacious class are built and converted. Victorious is not converted. Impact. Britain is economically far more stable. We standardise on 4 ships as the carriers. Audacious class probably survive into the 1970s. If you've got 4 carriers, you are not the argument you've got a continuous capability. It's going to depend how the 1966 white paper goes. If they decide that the carriers have provided them with so much capability and the 4 of them have kept that capability constantly, then you could well see CVA-1 completed, probably 3 of them built. And that's then going to change the Falklands War and various other things, and probably involve Hawkeye being part of the Royal Navy. In which case, probably you replace carriers when CVA-1 needs to be replaced, which would be about the 2000s. Because if your dad would come into service in the 1960s, add on 30 years, so that about 2000s, you probably replace them ship for ship. In which case, we don't have the problems we do. You probably have 3 carriers in service as a constant in 2000s, because in the early 2000s they were doing ship for ship replacements. So once you get to the Darings and those sort of things, you start getting weirdness to being taken part of. Henry Bofa, if starting at 35, would you agree Germany could have built a Scharnhorst class in the following yards: 1 Wilhelmshaven, 2 Kiel, 2 Hamburg, and 2 Bremen? So I'm presuming this is by 1941. Could they have had those completed? They couldn't have built all those at the same time, but if starting in 1935, they could possibly have got 7 of those hulls out and done. Yes, if they concentrated Scharnhorst and just gone with the 11-inch guns and just gone it. They might have even got a third out of Hamburg. Might have got a third out of Hamburg. So they could have even got to 8. The Brook. What might have happened if rocket development had been pushed in the interwar period as a workaround to the gun size limits of the Washington-London naval troops? You see, the thing is, if you're pushing rocket development, and that's a lovely thing to push, but you need a lot of different sciences involved to push it. And a lot of work. You only have to look at the history of the Jet Propulsion Laboratory and their efforts they go to. So I would say you could have seen some improvement. It's going to depend who's pushing it. And it's going to depend what launch capability. Because again, if you're looking for the interwar period, for much of that period, you've got canvas aircraft and all sorts of things which you might not want to launch rockets from. And launching rockets from ships, well, what are you doing? You're building an 18-inch rocket? 20-inch rocket? What's your guidance system? What's your target acquisition system? All these things. You've got a lot. It's not just having a rocket. It's having the ability to actually aim the rocket so it hits its target. There's a lot of stuff there to develop. You could do something, but it's... Okay, so let's see. If you use the radio guidance package you've used in a Queen Bee target drone, that will give you some degree of control out to about that distance. You've got a big enough rocket. Let's say you can... How are you going to wire guide it? It's going to be operating beyond range, visual range. You're not going to... Well, if you use guidance aircraft to fly it like you do to Bumblebee, but that's gonna be fun. But you've got spotter reconnaissance aircraft, so you could use them. Second seat could be flying it, and it could hit the target. Are you going to be able to keep up with it? Are you going to keep it visual range the whole way through, so you can see it and fly it? Answer is, it's going to be a lot of developments around it as well as it. So good luck. So interesting. They talk about the coal and timber for the iron, but where did they get the iron or the ore from the iron, for their iron and steel? Mostly from the UK. They also got quite a lot. They also would buy stuff from Sweden, from various Commonwealth Empire states. A lot of that stuff is manufactured in the UK. There are lots of steel foundries in the UK in this period we're talking about, and even today there is still Sheffield steel, which is owned by the government principally because it provides the quality of materials needed for warships and submarines. And it was going to be sold off or go bankrupt or something like that. And I was worried over who would acquire it, and the government just stepped in and bought it. They're the principals. It principally supplies them and their construction, so the British government owns it and runs it. And it's a really interesting conversation was had with certain manufacturers afterwards about how much they've been charging for steel and being fitted, etc. How much they've been marking up the price versus the cost of how much they're actually paying for it. So anyway, I noticed a pan of things named Force Z, Plan Z, and Falling World War. Is there a successful one, and why did so many fail? Can't think of a successful one, and basically it's because they picked the name because it sounds cool. But with Force Z, etc., it's pretty much you're dealing with the fact that it's the fourth generation, and it's the idea of using letters so that they appear random and no one's quite sure what they're associated with. So, reading a letter Force H, what is Force H? You don't know from its name. Whereas if you call it the Gibraltar Rapid Response Floor or response squadron, then there's an idea of what it is. And there's also Force K, but there's no real. I don't think there's any of the Z's were actually successful, really. Also, there's someone who's commenting on who's who calls themselves former severely depressed grad student, now functioning depressed adult. I do apologise, but I've shortened that name to DGS. Oh, again, if you give me a name that long, I'm just going. It's like how many Blackburns could a Blackburn burn if a Blackburn could burn Blackburns. I just call that Blackburn. I just call them Blackburn Maximus, which they are on here, I think. It just makes life easier. Oy, caramba. Goes around. Inspired by the shooting down of a Russian command plane, allegedly by their own surface-to-air missiles, when did a radar lock-on system emerge to tell pilots the missiles incoming? About the time they created terminal radar guidance, and the fact is that radar pings differently when it's providing that kind of data. And so you set up an electronic warfare system which monitors that, and immediately it hears it go ding, and the pilot hears. The pilot goes, wah! From my aircraft, and because most pilots fly the aircraft like this, with their right hand on the joystick, on the stick, and they go wah! Immediately, because the instinct whenever is to push something away, so you go that, which is also of course why you have your island on the starboard side of the ship, because pilots when they're coming in go wah! Push away. Fly off that way. Okay. Stafford, to get a jump on escort numbers, how difficult would it be to start reproducing the broad beam Type 12 landers and use 4.5 inch in a twin turret mountable? Getting the else. It would be impossible. You are talking about stuff which is so long ago, I don't think they even have ideas of where the jigs came from. To produce something like the Type 12, you would have to go back in here. You would not. It's far easier to start new. Honestly, you'd be better placed trying to produce a new back-to-basics frigate. And I'm be talking about a truly back-to-basics frigate. Even the Type 31 is not really back to basics. The Type 31 is... People keep going, oh, it's the cheap frigate. And I go, have you looked at what his capabilities are? It's not the cheap frigate. It's the general purpose we can use it as a present ship around the world frigate. And the flak frigate. It's not cheap. It just doesn't have the really excruciating high-end ASW of the Type 26. Which you need for the Type 26 and to do its role. In a hypothetical 1920s naval war, what plane appearing on horizon makes someone go, oh, sugar the most? Quite possibly a Blackburn, or an Avro Bison. Let me explain, because those are spotter reconnaissance. Those are fleet spotter reconnaissance aircraft, which are designed to manage a fleet. So if one of those is on the horizon, that means there's a full fleet somewhere nearby. You don't have those aircraft turning up as fighter aircraft on a cruiser, etc., or spotter or reconnaissance aircraft on a capital ship. You don't. That's not where they are. They will be on a carrier, and that carrier will be part of a major fleet. So you see that, you know there's a fleet coming nearby. Hendrik Bofa, the German Spar cruisers fit very closely to the 5,000-ton light cruiser you proposed. Would you consider replacing 3 twin turret 5.9 with 4 or 5 twin 5-inch dual purpose when developed if you were in charge? I'd probably go for, considering the size of tonnage you're looking at, I'd probably go for 4 5-inch dual purpose. And yes, I would. Because honestly, when you're dealing with a 5,000 ton light cruiser, you might as well go for the dual purpose system and have it as an AA cruiser slash large destroyer. And that's honestly the problem with the Didos. The Tribal class are cruiser built destroyers. The Didos are destroyer built cruisers. And that's one reason why the Didos are quite so crammed and quite so problematic in so many ways. Post-war especially, when they're trying to upgrade them. Because of that. Because they're destroyer built cruisers. Megascrow, I'm not sure what you're talking about. A 2-part battleship. Not sure what that is. Nice to go from. Question 3. If the 7 York class had been finished, would you refer to them now as the York and Exeter subclasses? It would depend how they were built. But possibly. You might have 3 Yorks and 4 Exeters. Because the York and Exeter do look so sufficiently different that frankly they should be regarded as definite subclasses, not grouped together. But it's because there's only 2 of them. They are. Mark Harkness, starting say 97, Germany and Austria agreed to let the Germans do the army planning for both nations. They just organised navies. Thoughts? Woohoo! Excuse me. One of the things I do think is the Austrians would immediately go, why are you doing a naval race with Britain? Why are you spending that money silly? There's no point. Build good quality ships so you can beat up the French and the Russians. And announce that your entire fleet plan is built with being able to fight the French and the Russians. And that's your entire justification. Take the heat out of the Anglo-German naval race in 1907 and you have a far easier life. Because the French and the Russians will never be able to compete you. You now have to match them, and honestly, you can match them with your eyes closed. And that's Germany's requirement. And Austria-Hungary announces it wants to match Italy and France as well. Because of the Mediterranean. And you then have an advantage. Also, you make the trouble more problematic for the British, because now the British don't have a reason to build up against you. They're going to build up against you because they're not going to want you to, and they're not going to let you be bigger than them. But they're basically, their 2-power standard becomes Austria and Germany. And it's far less politically heated for the British just to be maintaining their 2-power standard against Austria-Hungary and Germany, who are building up their capabilities to deal with Russia and France. Or France and Italy. So, the question is, once you start building ships without apparently justifying it, with something that's sensible, or even worse, justifying it by building it up against the British themselves, you back the British into a corner. If you're building against it for something that's reasonable and justified, the British will still be building against you, but the British will be building against you with a knowledge for it. And potentially, what you could end up with is the British, because there are enough people in it, who go quietly to the Germans and the Austrians, look, you don't need to build up that many ships. Why don't we need to build up that many ships? Because if you find yourself in a scenario where you're against them all at the same time, we'll bash their navies out the way. Do you understand? Yes. Very good. I like the twin turret. I like having twin 4.5-inch guns, and I think it's best to have a twin 4.5-inch gun layout. But the Mark 8 is probably the best. And that's the one in service. But I would also like the full fit of weaponry that they used to have. Yeah, I'm left-handed. I go into the island. Okay. Well, that's the thing. The most pilots are not, so it's fine. The pilots who are, you just shoot them if they start to look like they're flying towards the island. It just makes no. You don't do that. Yeah, they're a minority, and you just go, frig it. Yeah, universities in the United States are massively expensive. Peter Dawson, could Australia have a navy without Trieste? Probably not. Not a blue water navy, no. It's you need that. You need those facilities. You need the infrastructure there. Ethan Young, what are your thoughts on folks who have been saying that land-based anti-ship missiles and sea drones have rendered surface vessels obsolete? Chief Monks and Phil O'Brien and Andrew Davies. I haven't seen what O'Brien and Davies have said, but I will say this. They've been saying X and Y has rendered surface vessels obsolete for about 150, possibly slightly longer years. Okay? So far, we're still building, still using surface vessels. I would argue that I would argue that those same stats were issued about the Falklands War. And in Falklands War, as much losses as the Royal Navy suffered, they still won, and frankly, the losses were not unbearable. You prefer not to lose any, but they didn't. The losses weren't unbearable. I would say the Black Sea conflict we have going on has revealed a lot of issues, and the fact is, the Ukrainians have been taking advantage of those issues. Issue number one for the Russians is that the Black Sea is a finite space. There is, whilst you do have it's a large space, it is not an infinite space. You do not have that much flexibility. You have one entrance and one exit. You have a certain number of ports and infrastructure, and they are well within range of targeting. You also have a information saturation point whereby the Ukrainian intelligence assets are fairly strong in gathering information about Russian fleet movements, and they can do, because honestly it's not that difficult to get someone who speaks and sounds like a local to be able to stand within range of the harbour and see what's going on, let alone positioning a drone or something else to watch, and satellite information, and with what seems to be in the nicest way, and I'm trying to be as nice as I can, because I realise there are some people out there who this is going to sound quite upsetting for. The Russian Navy has shown what years of systematic financial abuse and corruption does create. And I know people then go, well, the Ukrainians have had some. Yes, but it's not on the same scale as the Russians. The Russians were masters at it. And the trouble is, if you try and argue anything else, you're looking at the Russian situation. The reasons they've been so hamstrung in this war is logistics and the state of repair of things. And the Navy suffered that just as much as the others. And let's be honest, they don't just have the coal to deal with, and the temperatures, etc., and lack of funding. They also have salt water to deal with. And I think the classic example is some of the ships which have been lost, where honestly systems might A, not have been working, but B, might not have actually been installed in refits by people who were borrowing the money for things. And before anyone comes back a minute and goes, oh, other navies like this, no. There is only one navy in the world, which I know of, and I have actual proof of because it's been known, where a captain sold his ship's propellers and replaced them with something which were not supposed to be used as propellers. Okay? It sold the propellers of his ship. If you, in the nicest way, you can point to the US Navy, you can point to the Royal Navy, you can point to, Fat Leonard, all those things. Yeah, but there's no captain selling off the propellers of their ships. There are issues. I will agree there are issues. The scale of the issue is the difference. I remember not long ago, a rising star in the Royal Navy was literally got rid of because he used his official car inappropriately. He was fired. And that was a scandal. And honestly, on the scheme of things, when I remember talking about this on bilge pumps, when I was talking about it, there was me sitting there going, this is someone who has been in the Royal Navy for 25 years. Who has been trained at the cost of hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of pounds. He's built up experience, all those things. Is a captain of an aircraft carrier. We are getting rid of them for if you're being uncharitable, a couple £100 of fraud. If you're being charitable, not understanding quite what they're supposed to be using the car for, because he used the car to drive home. He couldn't get a train, and he used the car to drive home for the weekend because they weren't using the car for anything else, and then drove it back. And that was. And you sit there and go, yeah, I can. It is technically, it is breaking the rules, and yeah, I know you do need to off, but there is so much temptation there to just go like then. Are we making example of this person for the sake of making example of them and going to cut off our nose to spite our face, or is there a good reason to make an example of this person? Yeah, that's the problem. It was a case of, and it's like we see with the US Navy, the amount of times there's a small issue in their ships, and most of the problems in their ships come down to the fact they're running them hot, and they are not getting proper rest time, they are not getting allowed to come home, they don't have enough personnel to properly crew them, they don't have enough throughput personnel, they don't have enough officers at both ranks or senior NCOs. The amount of times you see command climate problems. And here I go, well, is there a command climate problem? Are you replacing the entire command team because there's really a problem? Or are they struggling to deal with what they're being asked to do because they're not being properly supported and not being properly trained at lower ranks? And when you do that to one crew, that's one thing. You change the 2 senior officers and the senior NCO ownership. When you've done it on about 4 or 5 ships, there's a problem there. And the thing is, again, this is some of the scenarios we're dealing with in this world, but I will turn back to I don't consider the Black Sea necessarily a good methodology for proving one thing or other in terms of surface warships' existence with the Russian experience, because I think the Russian Navy is not, how do I put this politely? I would say large sections of the Russian Navy have not been properly supported or sustained or managed in a way conducive with maintaining their capabilities. So therefore, you are not dealing with necessarily a peer equivalent force to actually study. To be honest, Ukraine's ISR is NATO's ISR. We all have strong suspicions about that, Calvin Asberg. We all have strong suspicions about that, and that does kind of help things, if that is the case. But yeah. Yeah, there used to be a scenario that if you look at most of the senior admirals in World War I, World War II for the Royal Navy and the US Navy, most of them had run a destroyer aground at least once in their lives. Pretty much Jacob. I think that was there was all sorts of things around. It was weird. Look, how did the Trident test went? I've done a video about that, but basically the test of the submarine went fine. Yeah. The fact is though, here's the thing: Trident missiles have a shelf life. They've been in service for 30 years. Most of the ones we use for tests are the ones at the end of their shelf life, which we are not sending for repair. We are not going to recondition for some reason. And yeah, it can lead to problems. But systems work. The systems work, and the fact is that I would rather a reported test had failed and allowed us to correct issues than it was covered up to pretend it didn't. And then people go, well, there wasn't a big announcement made about it at the time. Well, no, there won't be, because it's a strategic deterrent. The policy of the British government, the American government, and pretty much every government which maintains a strategic deterrent in the entire world is to never comment about it, never discuss it, and never bring it up. Hello, Danny Wright. Come on. I think the ship was in dry dock and the screw was sent to repair. It was both screws, Carl, and they weren't supposed to. As she was supposed to be dry docked, and it wasn't part of the scheduled dry docking. Was the repair of the screws was not part of the scheduled dry docking. So yeah. It was a interesting. It's an interesting piece of history once you and interesting story, and it's not that long ago, sadly enough, for the Russian Navy. As said, there have been lots of. It's been badly managed, is what I'm going to say. Let's see, go from. If the 7 York class had been finished. What are the odds at least one or more of them would have been for one of the Empire's dominions? To say which one? You're probably looking in Australia because they actually pay for it. If anyone's going to get one, it's going to be Australia. Anyway, what yards were the HJKLMN battleships ordered from? I think the H ships were. It's the H ships, isn't it? HKLMN. The next German battleships were to be ordered from the same yards as are built Tirpitz, Bismarck, Scharnhorst. That's what they were going for, those same yards, because those are the yards which had the infrastructure to do it. Okay, so IGN carries the night. IGN develops night doctrine and tech on par with the 1959 Royal Navy. Okay, we'll give that a go. Just put it in for next month, for May's questions. And I said, question 5, why do people think the cannon class would be better off without the AA ability of the main battery? I presume people think that the getting rid of that would save a great deal of weight, and therefore that would enable that weight to be deployed elsewhere on the ship. Really wouldn't save that much weight. I know this because they tried to, they built turrets without the capability, and called the Mark II turrets, which are fitted on York and Exeter, and they're absolutely terrible. And actually way more than the Mark I's. So, yeah, and there's a few other ships. The last batch of counties had them as well. So, yeah, it's not the case. Leave the turret alone. It's fine as it is. Sometimes I was hoping they weren't lost to the parcels. I remember them being in service. Yeah, they were in the nicest way. The thing is, to build a ship like this, it's a lovely ship, but it uses so many different old techniques that we've got better systems than these things, and that's one of the true problems. One of the real problems with modern warship cost and most modern defense costs is throughput. You are often paying a premium on systems to have the ability to build more and faster of those systems should you need it, because you don't build enough in peacetime to justify maintaining that capability anyway. So basically, you need to, so you can turn around to your public and go, you're safe because in wartime we can surge build these. You pay a premium on the number you're building now. Whereas, let's say if Britain was building, I don't know. So we're going to build 9 Type 26s. Let's say we were actually building 16. Okay? And 8 Type 31s at least. And then we were going to build another 8 Type 32s after that, etc. from that yard. You'd probably be dealing with ships which were a lot cheaper. The reason they'd be cheaper is because A, the yard cost and surplus is going to be maintained over is going to be paid for over longer time, so they don't have to worry about that. But B, you're giving a significant throughput, especially if you're telling the yards that, well, yeah, after Type 32, we're ordered Type 33 and then the Type 34. And after they finish with the Type 26 build, we're going to go into the Type 83 build. And so they know what's coming. But at that point, you're pretty much running Royal Dockyards, because you are funding them completely, and the whole view that they are anything other than Royal Dockyards goes away. And the fact is, you're just paying a company a huge amount of profit to manage what is in effect a Royal Dockyard. I would argue that's what we're doing right now. If you look at All of our yards. That's pretty much what we're doing. We're paying companies a profit margin to run a royal dockyard because we are pretty much talking about single source suppliers. There's a yard which builds our patrol ships. There's a yard which builds our aircraft, our submarines. The yard which builds our major escorts. A yard which builds our smaller general purpose escorts. And yeah, we maintain all those yards, but we maintain the profit margins of all those yards as well, because they only sell to the British government. And the thing is, Royal Dockyards used to build for other nations as well occasionally. And so you could still do foreign orders if you wanted to with them, to pad out your order schedule and your construction schedule. That'd be fine. But, you know, you wouldn't be paying the profit margins to run them. And I know, here, this is the thing. People, when I say that, say, are you being communist? No. As I've told you before, I was this is UK UK part of the party. I was a local Conservative borough councillor in an area which is run by the Residents Association. So believe it or not, I was... Yeah, interesting. It's an interesting scenario in Epsom Newell. And you can find all that out, so that's why I'm always open with it, because people can find it out. It was an interesting time. But what I mean by saying is, I am definitely not a communist. And yet, quite honestly, Royal Dockyards, the current construction programs, etc., make a lot more sense. Because all you're doing from a taxpayer's perspective is paying for a single source supplier, which is otherwise known as a monopoly, and you're paying their profit margin with taxes. Yes, I was in politics. And before anyone asks, I also do, on politics front, I've also consulted on the defence policies of pretty much every major political party in the UK. Every hue. And I do it for free. Because when they've asked me, I always go, it's for national interest, so I do it. Paul Westwick, 16.8, where did your rule of 3 go? I was talking about production quotas, so 16 and 8 would provide the necessary production for the necessary time. And also, in a nice way, that allows you to go with the rule of 4. Once you're at 6, if you consider 16 and 8, with wartime parameters, you're generating, you know, let's say if I've got above a certain number of ships, so if I've got 9, and I've got rule of 3 running, I'm generating 3. At each, probably at each level, possibly 4. 4 active, 2 in refit, 2 in major refit, 3 in training, minor refit, all those things. If I've got 16, the odds are, I'm going to have 6 available at any one time, if not 8. With about 4 to 5 in training and refit, and training, minor refit, and those sort of things, and 3 to 4 in major refit. Yeah, I was, again, before anyone starts getting grandiose ideas by me, local councillor. So in Britain, in local council government in my area, that means we deal with things like bins, parks, planning permission. What else was the committees I sat on? Council tax, of course. What was my quasi-judicial role? That was the planning committee, wasn't it? Yeah. Planning, bins, parks, council tax. That's pretty much what your local council deals with. And to an extent, social housing. To an extent, as that's often quangoed off into a into a housing society. And again, there I was the one who was actually proposing more social housing, because Epsom and Newell is very expensive, but we also have schools, and we have a hospital, and we have an average house price in the borough, which means that most people who work in those places can't afford to live in the borough. And I felt that was silly because that was detrimental to us attracting those people and police people, etc., to work in our borough if they couldn't afford to live here. I thought that was basic common sense. If you want to get those people to come work for you, you need to make sure they can afford to live here, or at least live close enough that they can, that they can easily commute to work, that they can have a life. Because otherwise, they move elsewhere where they can get the same or maybe even more money and have a better quality of life because they can actually afford to live nearby. This was my basic idea of common sense. Or rather, as I like to term it, investing to save. Yeah, this is why I didn't last long, okay? This is why I did not last long. It was also when I realised that very quickly that I don't play the ideology game. That my view is I don't care whether the cat is black or white, to paraphrase the quoting about someone talking about Deng talking to Mao, I think it was. I care if it catches the mice. I think the that was the scenario. I just don't care. It's what does the job best. What's the most efficient, best value for money to the taxpayer? Go with that. Loving Masters. Germany goes for an oil-fueled 26-knot battleships. After Dreadnought, using oil bought from Austria-Hungary as collection. How does the British respond? 28-knot battleships. With bigger guns. Let's be honest, if the Germans do anything that smacks of actually a qualitative part of the race, the British will respond. They're responding to the qualitative race with the Italians, the Japanese, and the Americans, and they're building some of the Japanese ships involved in it. So yeah, they're going to respond to the Germans putting down a qualitative challenge, and they're going to jump over it. I'm not sure how they'd do it. Probably by having to put a whole load of boilers in it, but they could do. Honestly, though, I'm not sure if the tech's really there, especially if Germany's going for 26-knot battleships. The thing is, the British are going to know very quickly because the only people they can buy turbines from which can handle that power at that time, we're talking 1905, 1906, it's going to be the British. It's going to be from Parsons. Maybe Stafford. Langmasters, how many conventional warhead Harpoon missiles would it take to sink a Nimitz-class carrier? Depends where you hit it. Hit it in the right spot, 2. Don't hit it in the right spot, dozens. And even that 2 is me egging things on, so probably 3, at least, in the right spot. You do first need to pass the defense system of the carrier fleet and the carrier itself, and that's the whole thing. I have a lot of fun with people sometimes doing top trumps, and they are comparing the Kirov versus the carrier, and they're just comparing the stats of the ships, and I'm going, well, you've forgotten the air group for starters. What about the task force that operates with both? And how much does a naval yard need to be upgraded from being able to build Hipper to Scharnhorst? It needs some works in terms of its manufacturing capacity. It needs some work in terms of its support and its size of slip space. There are various small things, but they all need to be done to make sure, and need to be done to a high standard to support the weight increase, especially. 90 current. Was the Canny Class A ability of the main battery something planned from the start? Yes. Nice to everyone. So why did the British go for 7.5-inch guns on Hawkins class? That was what they had available, and they suited the shell handling parameters they were asking for. Literally, that's it. It's 1.5 inches up from 6-inch, as well. 96831. And the British work in 1.5-inch increments. So one of the reasons why I find it fun when people go, oh, they were working on 16-inch guns for the G3s. No, they were 16.5-inch guns for the G3s. The 16-inch guns are for Nelson and Rodney. 16-inch guns, the 16-inch guns are developed for Nelson and Rodney are post-World War One developments based on German experience and their studies of German guns and trying to make their guns better, using their idea of what German guns did, which was actually turned out to be wrong. The 16.5-inch guns, which were being worked on for the G3s, were 16.5-inch versions, upgraded versions of the 15-inch design. So basically, you're dealing with a 16.5-inch 45, is what the British were building for the G3s. Henry Buffer, where can I get information on German-Russian naval yards in 1900 to 1940? Let me look into my book list. I know I've got a book somewhere like it. So, bring up Excel. I would say for the Russians, this is probably your best start because it has the source list in it. I've got nothing on the Russian. Have I got it for the Germans? No. This is when you realise you might not have enough books. I might not have enough books. I don't. You see, that book's got notes about it, but I think it's more about their submarine ones. And it's not about their things. Oh, for fudge's sake. Stop it. I don't want... Let's see if I got it in a generic Naval Yard book. I've got the Rick Jolly's book. The British ones have got tons of books about them, most of which I've got. The Americans have got a few about them. But the German and Russian ones... for some reason... help if I can spell... I am getting really annoyed now because I've now gone on to something else to try and find it, and know that for some reason. Let's sort that out. So, yeah, no, there doesn't appear to be a decent book about it. There is not a good book about it. There's Hitler's U-boat fortress doesn't help. Perhaps Blood and Iron. That has got some details in there, but honestly, it's not. Hoya does a good job, okay, but it is more about the wider context than it is about Russia, about Germany's constructions, etc. Iron Kingdom by Christopher Clarke is also good, but again, there's not much about naval construction in there. Yeah, there really isn't much. I would love to be able to really give you a good, solid recommendation, but there really isn't anything. It's an interesting one. Okay. Leslie Mitchell. Why would HMS Hood and HMS Principal L send out with an escort? Was it due to out with an escort? Was it due to bad weather? They did have an escort. The trouble is the destroyers fell behind them because of the weather. So yes. That's why the tribals were so annoyed, because if they'd been back at home instead of off doing convoy duty, they'd have been with them, and they wouldn't have had to fall back. It's literally that simple. It is quite literally that simple. Nice one. How unlikely is it that because of the jump to 30.5-inch guns is why the British never built a 28,000 and 31,000 class with its 14 3 or 5mm guns themselves? Honestly, the British are more likely to jump gun tonnage than they are to gun size than they are to do that, because they just don't want the volume of guns. That's not the way the British work. The British would rather have more ships with more ships with those guns spread around those hulls, than have one ship with more hot guns. If let's say with your 14 guns, so you can have 14 guns on one battleship. Or the British would go and look, well, you can have 20 guns on two. Let's say you go, well, all right, I'm going to build 3 guns, ships with 14 guns. That's going to be 42 guns. Great. The British go for the same number of guns. We'd have 4. And once you've got 8 gun ships, we'd have 5. And who's got the advantage? The 5 8-gun ships versus the 3 14-gun ships, or the 3 14-gun ships against the 5 8-gun ships? Odds are the 5 ships are going to give you the advantage from the British perspective. Because remember, the British are always about volume of ships as well. being able to have enough ships to do the duties they need them to do. What could a navy convert a side-dumping log barge into that would be useful? Some form of landing craft or mine layer? Issue. Team Locker, did I say the F word? I'm sure I didn't. Okay. Backmasters, would you do a key ship on HMS HMCS Niobe? Naharashi suffered. I probably will do at some point. I think I covered it quite well in the year of the cruises, but I will probably do something on that at some point. Well, look, 668, where did your rule answer that one? Basically, the rule of 3 gets very... it becomes far more cumulative once you go up in numbers. Once you're above 9, 12... you suddenly have a lot more numbers. And if you consider, again, if you've got the 8 Type 31s, then it's they're going to be for longer range duties, right? They're going to be they're going to be the ones which are going to be in the Far East. They're going to be ones which are forward based in the Gulf. They're going to be ones forward based in the South Atlantic. So if you have 8 of those vessels, then if you're forward basing them, then you have 2 deployed out and 2 back in the UK for the very long for the major maintenance and swap her over when they need to, and to train up crews. So what you tend to do is hot crew them so that you have a crew which is trained up in the UK. They are sent out, slot in, new crew, old crew comes home. Or you do it in dribs and drabs. Steph Johnson, is the B&M a corvette simply because of main gun? Because they are really... and the rivers mount a similar size gun. Could the rivers mount a similar size gun? But you could probably adapt the rivers to do so, but why would you want to? What is there that you are going to engage with that gun that the British would not be happier to send a full-size frigate to go and engage? That's the real question. And also, when you fit that gun, is some bright-idead politician going to get the idea that that ship's now more capable than it actually is, and send it to do things, just because it's got a big gun on it? That's the problem. The Bayon is a corvette because of its firepower. That's literally the difference between an OPV and a corvette these days. Firepower. No, second. Why did Chile want 2 pre-dreadnought battleships armed with 9.2-inch guns? Well, let's be honest. Chile likes having naval power. As I've said before, there was a time that, despite various proclamations from the United States and its political leaders, there was a time in which they were the 4th largest naval power in the Americas. The other 3 being Brazil, Chile, and Argentina. And America was not in that ranking. It was only when it was only basically Teddy Roosevelt pointing out the curve and going, "Have you seen what our neighbours to the south are doing? You know we have the Monroe Doctrine. Yeah. They can actually enforce the Monroe Doctrine. We can't. But we will prevent interference by European powers in our continent. But they have a stronger navy to actually do it." It was embarrassing. That was how Teddy Roosevelt got the US Navy funded to begin with. Because he embarrassed the politicians. It's one of the greatest pieces of political theatre and drama you have ever seen. Go and look at how he plays them to get the Navy funded. It's like a fiddle. He first builds them up by talking about all the great things they've said they stand for, all the great things they've said they believe that as a nation they are for. And then he points out to them that their neighbours to the south are able to kick their... This is all assuming you actually have the personnel. Actually, here's the problem, Graham, and quite a lot of people don't understand this, but okay. So, with personnel, one of the problems we have two problems with personnel and recruitment in the UK and in pretty much every sense. One is the quality of housing. In the UK, that is a big thing. Military housing has been, it's constantly known as a byword for something which is poorly maintained and not being well looked after. And two, keep cutting things is providing no career advancement. If you think about it, if you cut a ship, yes, that's one ship, but you've now cut a ongoing captain's post. You've cut all the officers' posts, all the senior NCO posts, all the postings for all the personnel going into it. All the potential promotion slots. So if you have more ships and you have more of those promotion slots, you'd be amazed at how many more people you retain. Because they can actually have a reliable income. And there are quite a lot of people who quite like a reliable income and who quite like the naval life, but they don't see it as a stable life because people keep cutting stuff. That's the big problem. I've served for 20 years, 6 months and 9 days, so I do know. I know you know. I think we've had this discussion before. But, as I said, this is from me looking in and me talking to people who are joining Navy or joining the reserves and doing those things. Those things come up quite regularly. And it's when you're even talking to reserve units and they're going, well, do we have enough postings for these personnel? There's a great example. There's at least 2 of the areas in the reserves. People are actually advised not to apply for them, not to go for them, because there is such a block of officers and NCOs at a certain ranks that there is no room for promotion. You can't get promoted even in the reserves because they've maxed out their positions. And you sit there and go, with the reserves, that's really, really silly. You know, you go in reserves. We have too many lieutenant commanders who we do not pay for most of the time. So we're not going to promote any lieutenants. Oh, you know what? Those lieutenant commanders are now retired, and all the lieutenants have all gone, so now we've not got anyone. Oh, we're in trouble now. You can see it coming. You sit there and go, it's reserves. Promote some of the lieutenants to lieutenant commander. Promote some of the lieutenant commanders to commander who you want to keep. And just, you're paying the only time you pay them full rate is when they're actually activated. If you're not, you're just paying them a token amount of sum. And frankly, it doesn't cost you that much. It's far more sensible to keep it going. But if you've got that problems going in reserves, imagine the problems you have in the regulars. Jacob, kind of weird how working for a capitalist boss and more saying, yeah, this is the point I've often had with discussion with some of my university employers who didn't like the fact that I worked for Justin Craig. The revision education company, and they would go, why do you still work for them? And I go, because they pay me reliably and always pay me what they owe me. Does your new house have space for your model railways? Yes, it's going to have more space, and it's actually, I plan on setting up the model railway so there's actually a model railway running around the office like I originally planned in here, but never got around to doing because there just wasn't enough space for it with the books, when I'm being honest. But there is a plan for that. Henrik Beaufort, any comments on the Russian battleship aerial photos of 1940 showing the ships being built and how the bow being not next to it? Yeah, I've used all those photos in previous videos and talked about them. They were being built and doing quite well. Can the Swifter class really be considered pre-dreadnought battleships? I don't use pre-dreadnought, so you are asking me a question which I would probably not answer. Swifter. Well, they were originally ordered by Chile, aren't they? they are in that designation area, but they really are more likely large crews. They are fast capital ships of their era. They were useful as well, so they do count for it. And they use as the East Indies station flagship and the China station flagship. So, you know, they work quite well, and they do good duties for the Royal Navy. So the Royal Navy's happy with them. So you can class them as that if you want to. But I've always used Royal Sovereign instead rather than pre-Dreadnought. Nuclear forces can do. What could a Navy converter side dump? Answer that one. Hendrik Bofa. Germans used to angle slipways when watching the launcher Hipper and Bismarck. For example, you can see Hipper leaves a lot of space, and it seems the same size as Bismarck. Is there construction overlaps? A little bit, yes. A little bit, yes. HS Verdun. The tribals wouldn't have to fall back. You mean they'd overcook the engines and fly apart in situ, like so on the Excelsior in order to get there? No, the tribals are bigger. What people often forget is the tribals are not just bigger in terms of their tonnage. They are bigger. They are bigger in terms of their ships. They're bigger in terms of their height. If you put HMCS Hyder next to the C-class in Chatham, which I cannot remember the name for me for life of me at the moment, and you stuck them next to each other, you'd see that she's a big girl. She's a big lady ship. And there is a difference between their ability to operate at sea. And there is a reason, one of the reasons why the Battle class, Daring class get really pushed through is because they could operate in all weathers. They could. Thank you for the bless yous. Jacob, that's how all merchant ships do it. Crews change continuously. Oh, the list on the left is not the question and answers anymore. It's live chat. It's supposed to be the Q&A. Questions. It says questions. It's supposed to be questions. Where are the books? We'll get to the books. Some people seem to be chatting, and is it the light? Is it? It is the questions. Speaking of the Kirovs, what are your... Don't ask me what had happened there. Speaking of the Kirovs, what are your thoughts on the Admiral Nakhimov retirement? A refit. Nakhimov refit. Oh, the longest running refit of mankind. If it's produced as anything near the quality it needs to be, that's great for the Russians. If not, it's still going to be probably their flagship for the next 15, 20 years. Because they haven't got anything else. And the yards aren't producing anything else, and at the moment they're just not structured to do so. They are in an absolutely disorganized mess. Mainly because they've been just as short-term thinking as everyone else in the world. They really have. Really have been. They are always... It's one of the problems in life is that they are always as short-term. Someone is... Garius the Brit, stop tormenting me if you're watching this with pictures of the Graf Zeppelin you've built. It looks lovely, but, you know, stop tormenting me with them. It's not nice. And Drac is tormenting me with pictures of ships and doggies. Okay, this is just... They're just being cruel now. They're beeping, including me in them. Okay. Mario, what is your catalog system for your personal library? Do you just go by memory, or do you have something more formal set up? Honestly, when it comes to organization, to an extent, I have rough areas of where I put the things, and then I have, to an extent, memory. But I do have an Excel spreadsheet which has every single book I own in there. So I can search those books. And that Excel spreadsheet is actually divided up into things, into sections as well. Nice one. Isn't Jutland the type of battle the K-class submarines were intended to be used for? Yes, thank goodness for all the K-class they weren't. Mark Harkness, let's suppose the quasi-war with France is not resolved by diplomacy and breaks out into a war. What is Britain's position on this? Which quasi-war with France? You're going to have to be more specific than that. Literally, Britain has been having quasi-wars with France and actual wars with France for hundreds of years. You have to be more specific as to which quasi-war, because there's the one they were having in 1810. Well, hang on, that did broke out into that one. There's the one they're having in 1825. The one they're having in 1830. There's the fact that in 1860 the entire reason they launched Warrior is, of course, response to La Gloire, but that is also part of a bit of a quasi-war period as well. Which quasi-war? Was there a need in the Royal Navy for a SAM between Seawolf and Dart, or earlier to Sea Scout and Sea Slug? Not really. Because, you see, Seawolf is the point defense missile, and Dart is the area defense missile. And that's the reality. You need those things. You don't tend to have a medium range missile because, again, its value for the Royal Navy, for navies, is not that great. That's one of the things. When people go, it's kind of like with the Royal Navy at the moment. They are retrofitting Type 45s with CAM and launchers for the CAM missiles. So the thing that's going to disappear is the Aster 15. And the Aster 15 hasn't really had a point ever since existence, because if you're an area defense destroyer, and you've got a full-size cell, you want to put a Aster 30, Aster 45, you want to put a SM2, SM3, or SM6 in there. You don't want to put a shorter range missile in there, unless you're quad packing them, because then it makes sense. It's value. A short range missile that takes up the same amount of space as a long range missile is not as useful a sensible use of space. It's wars of choice, peace dividend thinking. It's not realistic warfighting thinking. And the moment CAM is fitted to the Type 45s, the moment they have the moment they have the sea scepters fitted there, then they're not gonna even bother or even think about Aster 15. It's gonna be gone. And they'll probably all be retrofitted up to Aster 30, Aster 45 standard. Which they can do, thankfully. They can be, thankfully, so they will do. But it's just, yeah. Medium range missiles for air defense missiles are not sensible for warships. That messes. The Courageous class, if the Courageous class, Fury included, were 9.2-inch armed cruisers or similar tonnage, so they're battle cruiser form, how would this change the Washington Naval Treaty? You would have a different form of requirement for your heavy, you would probably have a category of heavy heavy cruiser. Mainly because navies will be seeking to have them. Because let's be honest, the British are not going to get rid of them. If they are in cruiser form, and let's be honest, if they're in cruiser form, they could have 8 to 12 9.2-inch guns in four twin or four triple turrets. We're on that same size. They could be incredibly well armed, incredibly useful cruisers. The Royal Navy is not going to want to get rid of those. So those are going to be part of the Royal Navy task forces going into the interwar period and World War II probably still, and that's going to have to be included in the treaty. So either your treaty limit is going to go up to include air tonnage, which would kind of make a complete joke of the treaty, If they can, if you can build as many ships as you want up to 9.2 inch with up to 9.2 inch guns or whatever you decide above that, and up to that tonnage, which is let's say 22,000, 24, 25,000 tons. That's not going to get. Or you build you have ships under 10,000 tons. You then have a cruiser designation is up to 25,000 tons, let's say. Or maybe you make it slightly smaller, but and overlook them, kind of like you do Hood. And then you'd have to raise up the tonnages above that, but you would have fun with the treaties with them. Nice thing, why is the British handling their pre-dreadnought battleships better than the Germans? I'm not sure if it is better, but the British have a lot more of them, so they do have a lot more experience in operating them, which does help. Experience matters. We are still having quasi-world of French. Every time they finish... Carrying the Brit. Yeah, I know, you're laughing. You'll be building the Akagi next. At least the Akagi's a real ship. It's not a ship which never actually gets properly commissioned, and they've got a model of the Graf Zeppelin, but they haven't got one for the Illustrious or the Ark Royal. Aye. Yeah. Something. What do you think of about the modern Doomsday ship CGI renders? Those giant things. I think I saw a football stadium size thing with side pieces that make the ship look like a turtle. I don't think I've seen them yet, thankfully, for my peace of mind. Ship is 1.5 miles long and 1 mile wide, including the fins. Is it a spaceship? At that level, the nicest way. Once you're at that size, you are a floating mobile island. Blackmouse, how hard would it be to produce a twin mount of the Ottoman-era 5-inch gun? Well, seeing as I'm sure they have the ideas for how hard, not that difficult to design one, because they understand it very competently. You're going to have to make choices whether you want the barrels to be independent or combined, etc. mechanisms. The main difficulty is going to be mirroring systems, because then you'd have more space in the turret and be able to easily access things to maintain them. So that's some difficulty, but not again impossible. Design with maintenance space in mind, all those things, you could do that. Yeah, it's. I would like to point out, your question is how difficult. It's going to be complicated and it's going to be time consuming, but I don't consider it difficult because you're not asking for anything which hasn't been done before. Team Looker, here we are. How bad a state is the Russian Black Sea Fleet in? I don't think we'll know for a few years' time. We might never know, because to truly understand it, we need to see not just what's reported on the news. We need to have an accurate idea of the information being received by both sides involved in the conflict, and to have an accurate assessment of the Russian ships. And you are never going to get that in wartime. You are never going to get that in wartime. No one is ever going to admit that, oh yeah, and the reason those captains have all disappeared is because of that. My apologies. The American-French quasi-war of 1798 to 1800. Sorry. Oh, the American-French one. If that goes hot, that's fun. If the Americans end up in a war with the French in 1798, they're probably joining on with the British. That's the thing. If the American-French quasi-war of 1798 goes hot, then they might well join one of the coalitions. I think that's the war of the 5th coalition, is it? Is it the 5th coalition by that point? No, it's not the 5th. No, it's not the 5th. I was wrong. Is it the 2nd coalition? It's the 2nd coalition. I knew it wasn't the 1st, but for some reason I thought the 1st lasted less time than it did. 1st coalition. It'll be. Well, no. It could still actually be the war of the. It could be the war of the 1st coalition still. Couldn't it? Well, no, it would be the second coalition. So basically, you would get the Americans would join the second coalition, which is the Holy Roman Empire until 1801, Russia, Ottoman Empire, Naples until 1801, and Portugal and Sardinia against France and Spain. And that could be interesting. Oh, that's just, oh good lord, that's a weird war. Apologies on that. I forget sometimes just how quick the latter coalitions are. I always space them out more evenly in my head. Question 15 from Nice to Go. Would it be accurate that as the British pre-dreadnoughts, sunk in one of the victims of mines or U-boat attack, the British pre-dreadnoughts were facing threats they'd not been designed for? Yes, pretty much. You could argue they should have been designed for mines, and honestly they could have been bulged, which would have probably helped things, but that would have all taken time in the yards. And that's the problems. And I really should say, as always, thank you to all the patrons who are on my channel and who are supporting my channel, because frankly, without your suggestions of topics, A, I'd have to come up with 2 more lives and 2 more long patrols a month for myself, but also B, I would not have the money for the book collection. Definitely. The fact that so many votes are already in, there's basically no one going past the first one, because 12 people have already voted for Blackburn Maximus's alternate history zeros in the Mediterranean. No second Sino-Japanese war. The Japan joins the Allies in June 1940. That, to me, that does mean that the Japanese turn up and there is a follow-up strike on. Well, also, hang on. If they turn up in June 1940, their carriers get out there quite quickly. Which means Eagle gets a rest. Which means A, you have Eagle and Illustrious for the daytime, for the nighttime strike, and then the Japanese could follow up in the daytime. Oh my lord, the Italian Navy's getting wiped out. Seriously, the Japanese turning up in the daytime. If the Italian ship's all in that condition, oh good lord, they're getting wiped out. With the Japanese turning up in just a couple of carriers, oh, that's going to be painful. Ouch. Take care, Dave. Good luck with your early start. I thought Montreal Steak Spice was a good detergent, Stafford. Oh, nice. If these Chinese supporters have a hit list. If they are after little old me for watching and using their entire debacle as a good point of teaching, I will look forward to it. I'm not quite Drax level of having the sufficiently large armory at home that I could take on a small army, but I do have a corgi, and if you get past him, you have to deal with a poodle, and before you get to either of those, you have to deal with me, and I have absolutely no qualms about what I do to defend what is my family and my dogs. So, good luck. Anything else is life. Could Yamato fit through the Suez Canal? In the nicest way, if the Royal Navy have to rebuild the Suez Canal or widen it in any way to fit the Yamato through, they will do so, but I think it could fit. It could fit. Napoleonic Wars fought with a tech in the 1870s. Ooh. I mean, the British wouldn't mind it, because the British could build the tech in the 1870s. Most other nations couldn't. Thunder, how soon before we get news about a British historian crushed on the collapsed style stack of books? In a nice way, I built these shelves myself. They are rock solid. And probably overbuilt to an nth degree. And honestly, this was the frank conversation I was having with my family, was the thing I'm going to miss is my office when we move. Because I've built this all myself, and whilst it's no longer big enough to work for all the things I needed to do, it will be something I will miss. Which sounds really sad to say. I do admit, it's very strange and sad to say. The thing I'll miss about my home, which my family has lived in since it was built, is not any of the spaces inside, but is my office, which I built myself outside. Or rather, it was built first by builders. They did so badly, I rebuilt it, and it works. Can't joke. Why are you trying to pass the Corgi and Poodle? Monk is slamming your learning. Oh, so much. You'd be so lucky if that was how close you got. And nicest way. There was a joke a while back. I think I found it on YouTube where the guy was talking, where someone was saying, "Do you value your dog?" Said would use I think it was an American comedian. And he was asked by someone who was very passionate on the gun debate in America. And I'm not putting forward a view of this, but they said, how if I took your dog, what would you do? If I took well, in the nicest way, I'd use my gun to defend my dog. You're not taking my dog. If you try and take my stuff, I will defend myself and my stuff. You take a human life over a dog, in the nicest way, not only but my wife would. In fact, if you took our dog or harmed it in any way, what would happen to you would be unmentionable cruelty in several countries. And she would have donuts afterwards. Because you took the dog. It's kind of similar thing in our family. Touch the dogs. Just avoid my mum. You don't want to go there. What she does to you will not be something you want to see or experience. She is a lovely little lady. A lovely lady who is got arthritis and asthma and all sorts of things. And I still would say if you touch the dogs, I would put my money on her winning whatever happens. Because she will get inventive. And has skills. Yes, there are movies, and in nicest way, there is a reason why John Wick works as a movie. You do not need anything. The entire movie is justified on they killed his dog. There is no question that is entirely justified. Every dog owner I know, John Wick goes, yeah, I have no problems justifying that movie. None at all. You touch my dog. Yeah, John Wick is a starting point for what happens. Well, the main thing in 1940, if the Zeros are turning up, there's also the A5M turning up. And that video is going to come out again tomorrow. What would the Congo class get up to in such a place? I think you could find the Congos turning up in the Atlantic and helping helping the... you could end up with a battle of the Denmark Straits, which is Hood, Prince of Wales, and a couple of Congos versus Bismarck. I'm not saying that changes the outcome of the battle in terms of Hood, but it might change the outcome of the battle in terms of what the Bismarck crew does, because they've got 4 capital ships coming at them at that point. They could well go. Okay, so we might win this fight. We might win this fight. But There are 4 of them, and 1 of us. And that's before you get to the fact that if the Italian fleet has been wiped out in a Taranto night attack and then early morning attack, then you don't have Greece, you don't have Crete falling. North Africa campaign is probably finished fairly quickly, and you have all the Royal Navy ships that are also available and other carriers which might well be available in the Atlantic, and you don't have to deploy ships to the Far East to go hunt. And of course, the Germans and Italians don't get to use Japanese bases to do their submarine operations in the Indian Ocean. So, yeah, you change World War II dramatically. And also, there's how long does America stay out of World War II if the Japanese are involved in World War II, fighting on the side of the Allies? How long can America afford for Japan to be fighting for the good guys and sharing technology and all those things and not be involved themselves? Don't know. I have a sweatshirt that says, "I would push you in front of zombies to save my cats." Tanith, Dr. Dan would agree with that. Then right, it's Western culture. Don't mess with our pets. Yep. I think even Keanu Reeves, who's probably one of the nicest people you will ever meet, from all the reports I've ever had about him, would probably do what John Wick did if you downed his dogs. Right. Congo's hunting PB Admiral Shear in the Indian Ocean. Does Shear get to the Indian Ocean? No, Maxim. Nagato and Mutsu will probably be paired with Nelson and Rodney. That's just not a good fun thing for anyone. So Congo's a British radar? Ooh. Yeah, if the British share radar with the Japanese, it's going to be a very interesting scenario. Actually, were the 4 protected cruisers, such as the sunk as block ships at Ostend and the 3 protected cruisers, such as block ships at Brugge, raised post-war and taken away for scrapping? I think some of them were. Not sure if all of them were, but I think some of them were. Take care, Tanith. Nice agree from why were the protected cruisers chosen to be block ships? Because they just weren't valuable. They were considered. That was considered the best value for money for them at that time. Yeah, Mega Scrow. Keanu does have the training and some serious skills. What side of the Valentine's Day fire? Oh, I'm tempted to say someone trying to be someone trying to be romantic. No. Sorry, don't have that in my notes for some reason. Or rather, yeah, it's a gap. I should probably get it. I'll look into it and sort that out. If you send me if someone sends me that as a note in Discord or something, I would be able to pull that off. Oh. So, any Japanese special forces that might form command or raiding force in Zero Zone Mediterranean scenario? Potentially, but how soon they get there will be a completely different matter, and honestly, there's not really a need for them to slot in with the SBS, etc. But they might do. I think it's going to be interesting. I think Japanese submarines might have a nice time in the some fun, and want to have some fun in Mediterranean. And oh, good lord, it's a nightmare scenario for the Germans and the Italians, because the Japanese joining at that point means Britain doesn't have to fight a land war in France, but they can quickly wipe out the Italian Navy. As said, double carrier night attack, and then day attack followed up with 2 Japanese carriers, and I don't see how anything really survives in a fit state to be repaired or put in service anytime soon. Even if Japanese dive bombers are doing the day attack on the Giulio Cesare, it's not getting out of there. Okay, I do love when some people have a little bit of knowledge and they don't think it through. Well, rather, they don't have the. They haven't gone and done the. They could have answered the question themselves, basically, if they'd gone and done a little bit more research. While I was making a note of Night Cigarette Friends questions with notes of where to go and do the research, I also had a comment come through on one of the other videos that have gone up this weekend, and I want. I can answer that as well while I'm here. In fact, New IQE 4472, you're gonna see the answer. I actually answered yours. There was the other one I just haven't answered. And while saying that, I'm going to again point out on the comments, and there are some comments which get held up literally because my cousins aren't learning words from this YouTube channel. Okay, I need to have that plausible deniability. So if you've got a comment which you've written, and I can name the people who have done that. There's Draken Red has a comment in my held for review section. Ron Rubaka has a comment in there, and Waitstrol has. As much as I may agree with your comments, you have managed to trigger the blocked words due to potentially inappropriate because of the phraseology and because my little cousins aren't learning new words. So, thank you for your comments, but if your comments aren't showing up, and I only found that out because, honestly, the other day, for some reason, YouTube was eating Paul from Chicago's comments, and he messaged me and went, my comments have been held up, and I went, okay, I'll go check, because I never bother to check the held for review comments, because my presumption is, because I always explain it on the channel, it would never happen. And I went, hang on, I recognise some of the names of these people. There's not just people in here who are spam bots. There are people here who I recognise. I'm sure they've heard me mention that there are very strict criteria on here for the block words on the things. And there are ways to get around it. Frigate, cruiser, all these things can be used. But yeah. Gets held up because my little cousins are not learning stuff from this channel. I like my life. I choose life. Thank you, HMS Ferdon. I like answering questions, but sometimes the questions are... Well, let's put it this way. With IKB472s, if he doesn't mind me using it, question. He was asking a comment of, wouldn't the Free Corps be a trouble in Germany? And the answer to that one is quite simple in 1920s Germany, because of the breaking it up. Well, the trouble is the Free Corps are mostly made up of army veterans, of course. And whilst Germany's united, they will fight for united Germany, and that's fairly obvious. But the thing is, if you divide Germany up into its pre-unification principalities, most of the army units were still kept in that form. They just combined the armies. So, the thing is, you have Prussia, Saxony, the Duchy of Mecklenburg-Schwerin, Duchy of Mecklenburg-Strelitz, the Duchy of Oldenburg, Saxe-Weimar-Eichstätt, Saxe-Lauenburg, Duchy of Anhalt, Duchy of Brunswick, Duchy of Saxe-Ulrich, Duchy of Coburg and Gotha, and all these these organisations, and there are many of them, formed together in the first phase. In the second phase, you have the Kingdom of Bavaria, Kingdom of Württemberg, Grand Duchy. So depending on how much you break it down, you could break it down into a very small groupings. But the thing is, their army units retained their titles and status and recruiting areas from that period. And as such, if broken up, the odds are quite a lot of the units of the Free Corps will break up along those lines and supporting their areas. And also remember, all those areas will be allowed their own troops, their own police, their own things, which they'll have to recruit people for. Which means instead of having quite so many of those armies and soldiers, how do I put this, and the people who organised the Free Corps dismissed, you're going to need so many more administrators. It's a great way of causing maximum problems because of the amount of duplication of effort that will now be involved. Instead of having one army staff to organise, you'll have about 24 army staffs to organise. It's going to be brilliant fun. And it's going to keep quite a lot of those people busy. Current Doc, if you could have any ship you have ever covered fully operational for the current Royal Navy, which would it be? Ever covered. Fully operational for the Royal Navy. You see, I'd love to say HMS Renown, because you know how much I love HMS Renown. She's gorgeous. And she's a really special vessel. But, and I think this is the criteria I have to go with. At the moment, what I would really like is a third aircraft carrier, so I'm going to go for CVA-01 and her sister CVA-02. And I would like both of those to be viable, because then you'd have at least 2 carriers available. But honestly, if I have a choice, I'd have a third Queen Elizabeth class in service. Now, I'm going to be back in a second. I'm just going outside because I have been messaged that the bird table might have fallen over again. And I'm going to possibly combine that with a comfort break for a second. Possibly. It's going to depend how much rain is coming down. Because, you know. But if I'm going that way, I might as well get that. If that makes sense. Oh, good lord. Why we have 2 leaning towers of Pisa, I do not know. Why we have to have 2 leaning towers of Pisa, I do not know. Oh, good lord. Friggin', it's raining out there. And it's not pelting rain, it's the sort of rain though which gets everywhere, if that makes sense. Hey. There you go. Back. Thank you. Well, I was presuming ship had to be at least terrestrial. It had to at least be a normal ship, because otherwise I would be going for a Venator. A fully operational Venator class. Because as you know, the Venators are my favourite. And that'd be quite cool. Or a Daedalus class. Now, Daedalus, I like Daedalus. Oh, I could have fun with the Daedalus. I'm not really keen on any of the Star Trek ones. It's always the crews more than ship that interests me. And the thing is, Defiant would not really be that useful. Although you definitely wouldn't have any crewing trouble with Defiant. And Defiant would allow you to take out the entirety of the world's armed forces in about 5 seconds. But then you'd have to rearm it. Yeah. Oh, Daedalus class or a Venator. Oh. My head is saying Daedalus class because we can better sustain and support it. My heart is saying Venator, if we're going sort of for sci-fi ships. Graham Hanlon, what is the sovereign Queen Elizabeth class carrier? What is the real reason they did not put Venator cannibals on them? Real reason? Look, there's no real reason, it's just cost. And also, you'd have had to rebuild the entire design. Because they were designed without cannibals, in terms of cannibals being put in. And it was cost. And the whole thing has been driven by cost. Because for the Treasury said they wouldn't, no matter what size the Royal Navy chose on carriers, they were only going to get 2 ships. So the Royal Navy went for the biggest ones they could get. And then the government, to try and save money, in short-term principles, may extend the build so much and pay them so much to build slow, they actually ended up paying the consortium enough of 3.5 aircraft carriers, but took delivery of 2. So there are so many bad decisions made with the Queen Elizabeth class. It's beyond belief. And the fact that we got such good ships out of it, and they are good ships, but there's only 2 of them. Which is one of the reasons why you hear more often about the issues with them. Because when you have 3 and you have issues, you hear less about it because, oh, it's just the 3rd one's at sea, and then the 3rd one, da-da-da-da-da. The thing is, you don't hear about issues when there are 3 or 4. As much as you hear about with 2. Because with 2, if you have both in trouble, then it's a big thing that you have to randomly take one from 30 days preparation to go to sea down to 8 days. It goes to sea within 8 days. That's a big thing. A big, big thing. But it doesn't... It might be a big thing you achieved it, but the fact is, if you had a 3rd carrier, you would have been able to have it more quietly done. And you'd have more crew, and you'd have that more sort of growth available there. Andromeda, is she a self-repair? Andromeda would be, again, lovely, but the thing about Andromeda, and this is going to sound strange, the thing about Andromeda is while she can self-repair, we then have to deal with the capability of an AI. And honestly, there's a certain point at which I would prefer Romy running the government, and honestly, having an AI running the government is not sensible. Okay, so... because because for similar reasons why you don't want the why probably the Emperor did not want the his sons running the government of the sons running the government, because in Warhammer 40k, because the trouble is the the needs of your regular people are very different from the needs of your almost godlike children, and an AI compared to us is going to be godlike. They're going to be infinite life, you know, they're not... The differences are just, yeah. So, as much as I love Andromeda, and she's probably my favourite science fiction ship in all science fiction, she's not a good choice for this scenario. So it's a treasury game. It's, if in doubt, Graham Hunter, if there's ever a problem in British procurement, it's the treasury and politicians. Don't worry, Draconin. It was sent ages ago. It doesn't matter. It was held up. I noticed it. The thing is, when I was running through it, I was expecting to see just spam from various bots offering me, you know, the usual stuff. What is it? Chemicals which allow you to go all night. Organ extension chemicals, apparently, which make things grow, but don't apparently make other things grow, which is amazing if they actually achieve that. To ladies and occasionally gentlemen of negotiable virtue, or rather negotiable time, perhaps, better description. To all sorts of offers that you usually get in the thing. I hope you have all realised, have noticed, if any of you follow me on Twitter, you might have noticed recently that there are some incredibly enthusiastic young ladies who basically like everything I tweet now. I mean, I never realised naval history was quite so popular, with so many young ladies who have surprisingly similar names, who have surprisingly similar pictures of them in surprisingly similar states of undress on beaches. But apparently it is. That's Twitter. Oh, well, that's X, formerly known as Twitter. Do I have any sci-fi model spaceships? Not in here. Would wetlands created by beaver dams be viable battlefield obstacles to funnel armored forces into kill zones? It could assist, but honestly, you could probably also knock them out. It's going to create problems both ways, and you can't really control them. Knights of everyone. Would the Fuso class battleship have been disposed of in 1922 if they had 10 or 12 or 15 5-inch guns in either 5? Let's see. So you want them to have 12-inch guns, and would they have been disposed of if instead of having 14-inch guns, they'd had 12-inch guns? I'm not sure. Even in a treaty scenario, I don't know if they would have been disposed of. Yeah. I might be going to do a video about Seto Tetsutaro at some point. Because, frankly, I think I probably need to. I probably need to do a book about him, a video about him at some point. Probably. But for me to do that, I'm going to need to cap that to actually get copies of his works, which is fun. So if anyone knows where you can find decent copies of his works, please do tell me. And that is, of course, Sato Tetsuaro Taro. Nice one. Question 22. In the eyes of the Royal Navy, why do they not look too keen on a large cruiser? Nice thing everyone, I would disagree with the premise of the question. The Royal Navy looked very favourable in the idea of a large cruiser. It's just that with the Washington Treaty they couldn't build one. And then in wartime they were concentrating on surging out what they were already constructing, because that's far easier to keep producing and step up what you're already producing than to stop producing something and start producing something else. Because that break in construction that's going to be necessitated by the changeover is more difficult to arrange and takes up time. Whereas if you just keep building versions of what you were building, and that's why the 6-inch cruisers are being built, because they were already building those and they just continue building, and it's variations on the 6-inch gun cruisers that allows you to churn out far more quickly and far more effectively. Alright, would a pair of enlarged Invincible carriers have been useful to have between the Invincibles and the Queen Elizabeth class carriers? Not really. What are they going to do? The point is, Danny, while you had the Invincibles and you had HMS Ocean, you had enough ships. You had 4 ships, plus you had Argus. So you could have had 5 4.5 ships, if you want to call them, for the aviation roles. We've now gone down to 2, with Argus filling out other roles as well rapidly. So that's the problem. And realistically, we could have gone down to 3, the size of the Queen Elizabeth class. We would be better in a scenario where we got Albion and Bulwark. Instead of Albion and Bulwark, we'd built LHDs to replace Fearless and Intrepid. And we maybe got 3 of those. So we had 3 LHDs with ski ramps to back up Queen Elizabeth and Prince of Wales. But honestly, the real problem is we didn't build HMS Ark Royal. We should have built a 3rd Queen Elizabeth class and called her Ark Royal. If you're paying for 3.5, going to end up paying for 3.5 ships anyway. You might as well actually get 3 ships out of it. Why does the UK need 500 armor trucks? Probably because they need to move stuff around. Let's be honest, logistics is the critical thing. And you move a lot of vehicles, you move a lot of things by moving them around. And let's be honest, also I would say with the army, one of the problems we've had with Afghanistan and Iraq is that a lot of the conventional warfighting force has been let to just sit. And things which should have been replaced decades ago have been let to sit. This is part of the problems with Boxer and Ajax and all the other systems coming through. The reason they're all coming in now is because the things they're replacing are very, very old. And the good example, I want you to all look up the FV432. If you haven't ever seen one, I will show you one. If you see it and think immediately, that looks like something that I've seen in Warhammer, that's because I swear they are still in service in Warhammer. Because I don't think they are ever going to be replaced. I think they will always be in service. I do not think the F432 can ever be taken out of service. Yes. I think there is some sort of thing, kind of like the birds in the tower. You know, the ravens can never leave the tower of London before it falls down. Well, the F432, which has been with the British Army since 1963, can never be retired because otherwise the British Army will collapse. The updated version is called the Bulldog, if you're wondering. Why would it be better for Leander HMS Pendulum if she doesn't use a 4.5-inch gun? Because she's the first ship going into San Carlos Bay in the Falklands War, and she sent a signal saying, if you see any problems, engage immediately. She has no 4.5-inch gun to do engagement, so they were actually busily working out whether they could manually aim an Exocet missile to go and hit a land target. Nice to say, everyone. How, I presume that's daft, not draft, is the idea of World War II design carriers at the size of modern World War II, modern supercarriers. That would be interesting. You could theoretically do it, but you need to do a lot of infrastructure upgrades to get there. And a lot of work. Excellent. Yes, Games Workshop did base the Rhino off them, for those asking. Yeah, it did. Oh. They're still in service with the British Army to now. Oh. So. Nice to for one. As the Type 26 would be 7, I presume, I don't think that's 74,000 tons, so I'm presuming 7,400 tons. If the, yeah. Who benefits the most? If the Type 26 is bigger, it benefits everyone. But probably the Australians are currently happiest because it would have a far bigger VLS system. And the Royal Navy would be quite happy because it would have far more space for things. Probably will have the same size crew, though. That's what the Bren carrier wished it was. Yeah. But this is in answer to the question of why does the the British Army need to buy so many trucks? And so many vehicles at the moment. It's because they've still got vehicles from 1963 on the front line. So think about that. 61 years young. 61 years young. Still in frontline service. The most inaccurate thing is that the B-52s aren't providing the guard. Oh, no, that's because the B-52s are now the Emperor's personal bombers, and you don't hear them until he deploys them. Phil Williams, during the British First Gulf War, the Yanks called the British Army the borrowers. There have been worse things they've been called. I guess that night's a great for one. Take care, Danny Wright. And I'll remind the chat that we do naval history in this chat more than current politics. Just a small point. That's mainly so we don't have fun with YouTube. I don't remember, were they not? Yeah, they were. They did. They bought some of the FV432s back. Just don't go there. Okay, it's embarrassing. And for the, it serves because it works. If you ever use the BMP, you will quickly love the FV432. That worries me, but doesn't surprise me. I have actually, yeah, BMP, no, oh, God. And the BTRs, oh frigate. What if the British have 4 Ashland class equivalent ships? Duke only infantry vehicles by mid 1939. Ooh. That's an interesting point to make, because that's not as an American as you might necessarily think. Where is my ship design book? That has it in it. Yeah. Okay, so I know Ashland class, which by the way is the first generation of landing platform dock. Yeah. LSDs were started as a requirement in 1941. Design was prepared by the Admiralty to meet British staff requirements, and the ships were then ordered in America under the Lend-Lease. So the answer to the question is, did the British have them? Would the British have them in 1943? They were ordered in America because it was cheaper to order them in America and easier to build them in America than it was to build them in the UK, which was being bombed at the time. Let's see. So, yeah. The Ashland class are pretty much it. They are built for the British and the Americans. They were required. Design was developed. It was supposed to have at least two British landing craft tanks, and yeah, pretty much it's designed for. They are designed for the Royal Navy, built by the built for the US Navy and the British. I'm not sure if did any of the Ashland class end up in British service. No, did they all? They didn't come in service in 1943. They were designed to a British standard. But I don't know if any of the Ashland class actually end up in British service. I don't think they did. They went mainly to Pacific Theatre. Did any go and help out the Royal Navy? Yes, the Casa Grande class. The next generation ships. They went to the Royal Navy. Eastway, Highway, Northway, and Oceanway were the Royal Navy ones. So basically, the Royal Navy starts. They get none of the first generation, but they get some of the second generation. And then the Tom Aston class, I don't think any goes to the Royal Navy, and neither do any of the Anchorage class, because they're all far later. Yeah, so basically, that's sort of what happens. Does what if the British have 4 Ashland class equivalent ships vehicles by mid 1939? So if the British had acted on their design study, interesting thing about the design study in 1941 is the British based it off a design study that they had worked on in about 1936 from memory. Please note. So if they go and proceed that study and build them, if they have them in 1939, they're used in Norway. And they cause merry fun in Norway because they are mobile deployments and they are rapidly deployable. They're also partly part of some of the raids. And yeah, they probably get used a lot, and that might mean they get sunk. But they're going to be very happy with them. If they have Duck and LVT-1 vehicles by mid-59, Duck and LV, then if you have LVT-1s, especially if you have LVTs, landing vehicle tracked, and Ducks, then that's going to change Norway completely because your forces are going to land and already be motorized. And honestly, if look, let's put it this way: if Carson de Weert has a motorized, semi-motorized, mechanized amphibious force at his disposal in Norway, Lord help the Germans, because he will be moving a lot faster than he does historically. A lot faster. Nice again. Does the Royal Navy go hard on the automation if the Type 21, 22, 23 are on? Yes, they do. I know I was vlogging her last week. You all seen my video recently, a short video recently. There's a lot of discussion about vlogging going on. Did the RN have any contemporaries for the Alaska class? They did have ideas for 9.2-inch gun cruisers. And it wasn't going to be a stretched town class. It was going to be a 9.2-inch gun cruiser. Pretty much like the town class, but probably the debate was whether it was going to have 9 or 12 guns. Not Revenge. Lots of old history talk about modern units sent into the past, but what about the other way? On 3rd and 9th, 1959, the Grand Fleet of 0309-1914 sails into Scarpa. And High Fleet of the same day sails into the Jade. The Royal Navy sits there and goes, woohoo! The German Navy goes, oh, frigate. Oh, speaking of foreign wars, any update on that Phalanx close in Wales used on a Houthi missile, or was it a drone? No confirmations, nothing I can talk about publicly, but, yeah, the instinct is not missile. Instinct. I don't know. Shimron, modern conflict shows artillery expenditure at higher than expected rates. More logistics is required to supply what is hoped for, a hoped plan for artillery reserves, to where it is needed. Yeah, we hope. Take care, Team Locker. Colin Cameron, the first Gulf War, the first tank over the border was a British Avery that was a World War II and Suez veteran. That doesn't surprise me. I had heard something similar to that, but yeah, that would not surprise me. Question number 25. What stops a 5,000 to 6,000 ton Type 1 Amazon class not having aluminium in its design? Hopefully, if it's going to displace that much, they've actually gone for steel. Two-man for 154. People seem to think that Dam was hit even though it's being rearmed to go back. People think all sorts of things. Look, in simple phraseology, Cartoon Man 154, there are people who honestly believe that HMS Invincible was sunk in the Falklands War, and the British managed to rapidly and secretly build a new Invincible class vessel and send it down and replace her. And apparently it was sunk with the loss of all life as well, so also managed to hide the sheer number of sailors that were lost and all the grieving families and everything like that, and keep that quiet. There are honestly people in the world who believe that. So, in the nicest way, if there are people who believe a British government would spend the necessary money to do all that, then there are people who believe anything. And even then, how quickly do they think you can build a friggin' carrier? Even a baby one like an Invincible class. Takes years. Not only did they expect them to... The sheer amount of money it would cost the British government to do that. It's just never going to happen. That's usually my first thing. Whenever someone tells me a conspiracy theory about the British government, I go, does it involve spending money? Yes, that happened. Easy way to disprove with the British government. Does it actually involve them spending money? If so, the odds are it didn't happen. So all those reporters, look, no, nice way, no, they made them up as well. Colin Cameron. They made up the reporters on Invincible as well. It's all made up for. It's all bribes by the British government. God knows how much money the British government have spent on it. I mean, millions, billions. Yeah. Nice thing. Would a 5,000 to 621 Amazon class be able to take Seawolf? And potentially. I don't see why they shouldn't. When you've got that big a difference, we're talking about the Amazon class pretty much going... Let's get the actual stats to make sure we get this right. 21 frigates. You are talking about a vessel which has gone up from... After strengthening, this is their strengthening, from 2,860 tons in standard, or 3,360 tons in full load, to pretty much 5,000 to 6,000 tons. So it's almost doubling in displacement. So yes, I would hope they were made of steel. I would hope, therefore, they didn't need the strengthening. And I would hope that they could take Seawolf at that point. Stephen Rutherford, is there anything preventing combining the role of torpedo and dive bomber into a single type from the outset naval aviation tech-wise, or must they remain separate? Well, to answer your question, the whole desire to combine them, theoretically the Swordfish can do both, and the Swordfish does do both, sort of. But honestly, when we're looking at the various aircraft which come after the Swordfish, including, of course, the Barracuda. The thing that holds up the Barracuda so much is two things. It's one, it's getting the right engine for it, actually keeping hold of that engine, despite the RAF keep trying to take all control of all engines. Well, the Air Ministry trying to take all engines away from the Fleet Air Arm. And two, it's the desire to make it both an excellent dive bomber and an excellent torpedo bomber. And that is a problem. And also there's the differences in approach, because one has to, if you think about it, to drop a torpedo, you have to be designed to go quite low, quite slow, and carry a very heavy object, usually lengthwise along the ship, along the plane. If you're a dive bomber, you are going to be quite high, you want to maneuver more quickly, because you're going to be right in the air, and boom. Basically, a torpedo bomber survives by doing nap of the earth flying, keeping as low as it can, so when it comes over that horizon, it is as close to you as it possibly can be. That's what it wants to do. Dive bomber does more accuracy from long range, so they don't want to come over the horizon and go zooming up and then come down. They want to come in from the top above in the cloud layer and dive down from the cloud layer. So there are differences in operations which make it difficult to combine them, and there are differences in their outcome which make it difficult to combine them. It's not impossible. Just doing it from the get-go is not going to be really viable. Also, the RN has salvaged the wreck. I know, that's even more fun. The RN has salvaged the wreck and hidden it all. There's just so much money spent. Seriously, the whole problem with that entire criterion, if anyone is watching this from Argentina or anywhere else in the world who actually believes it's possible, in a nicest way, the British government are not going to spend that money. That is the entire there are many problems with your idea, incredibly many problems. But one of the biggest ones is the British government are tightwads. So, Blackmouse, do you think the recent conflicts show a greater need for amphibious reconnaissance armored vehicles? Yes, I would like them. I have a rain warning going in effect. I have huge amounts of rain going on around me. Cute. Black Masters, would the VTOL system used on the X-32 have been possible for the Harrier jet to make it supersonic when it was developed in the 60s? Potentially. The British had plans for a Super Harrier. There were a lot of ideas for a supersonic Harrier VTOL aircraft. Again, it was linked with the CVA-1. It's linked with a couple of other projects, and I sat for many years beneath the design in one of my offices at one of the offices I worked in, actually at King's University, one of the offices I worked with Kingston, below the designs for it, because they were worked on by Hawker, not far from where I was actually working. So yeah, they looked at it. They looked at options for it. Connor Cameron, if the Japanese were part of the Taranto attack, do you think the US government would actually take notice of the Shallow Harbor attacks and do something about Pearl Harbor's offences? Potentially, but they might then go, well, hang on, the British did the night attack, and then the Japanese came in the next day. And that's the big problem, you see, because if the British attack during the night, that's going to create a huge amount of damage. If the Japanese then turn up in the morning on the next day, first thing, crack of dawn, turn up, when the Italians are trying to move the ships out, trying to get them safety, the ones that can move, trying to sort out, do damage control and repair, and they're going to attack, the sheer devastation that could cause will be immense. Oh, the shortest... honestly, the CVEs... Let's go look at the Casablanca class, because if anything's going to be short and quick, it's going to be them. Well, if we consider Steamer Bay, which is CVE 87, is laid down on the 4th of December 1943, launched in February 26th February 1944, commissioned the 4th of April 1944. So yeah, that's I'd say that's probably the quickest, because that's 5 months. So 5 months is probably about as quick as they get. Yeah. Hang on, no. There's Lunga Point, which is laid down 19th of January 1944, and commissioned the 14th of May 1944. So January, February, March, April, May. Yeah, it's about 5. It's slightly less than 5 months. So it's about the 5 month mark. February, March, April, May, June, 1st of June. That's Halinda's very, very quick, and frankly, some of them just get quicker and quicker. I mean, very, very quick. So you're talking 5 months for a CVE. So the entire concept that HMS Invincible would be churned around in days and then down in the Falklands War in days is complete and utter twaddle. Because if the British government had the ability to basically 3D print aircraft carriers, they would, in that speed, they wouldn't have anything into regular service. They just rely on that for wartime needs. Yeah, the project number for the supersonic Harrier was the Hawk Siddeley P1154. Magnus, with a better jet engine technology, do you think we might see jet-powered VSOL take over the role of the V2 role? Potentially. Potentially. There are some very interesting options out there. And it'll take a while. It'll take a while. The V22 is very much the first generation. Nice to go everyone. How likely is it that Type 22s that are 5.6 would have their 4.5-inch gun retained in the Batch 1 and 2 models? Probably, because you've got the space for it. Probably because you've got the space for it. But back in one they could lay down landing decks on battleship guns in our circles. It wasn't done in hours. That took weeks as well. I mean, literally, they're in refit for weeks. It might be 3 or 4 weeks, but it's still weeks. But the idea, Colin Cameron, that the things were faster, or anyway, that if you're putting down a platform over a battleship's guns, it's not going to be a quick affair. You have to build all sorts of structures to support it. And you have to build those structures in such a way they don't interfere with the operating of the guns. So they have to rotate with the turret. It's just fun. Life is fun. Life is fun. So, books. As I finally caught up with the questions, let's talk through some books. And I'm going to get rid of image free while I'm doing it. I'm going to open OBS and I'm going to say preset free. Voila. So this is United States Naval Aviation Patches. Aircraft Carrier Wings and Shores by Michael Roberts. And it's the first in 3 books. And it's an absolutely gorgeous thing. If you are interested, and this is the thing, it is very clearly what it is. It is a book of patches. It is not a book of text. It is not a book of long discussions. It is a book of patches. It is basically a picture book. And all 3 of them, together of the trilogy, are about £70. But if you want this, I highly recommend it. If you like this, if this is something which you are going to be really intrigued by, looking at all these patches and having it as a reference guide, then I highly recommend them. They are gorgeous. That is one. Then we have Aircraft Attack Squadrons and Helicopter Squadrons by Michael Roberts. It's cool. It's good. It's worthwhile looking at. It really is. And this, again, they are wonderful. They're really nice, and they're going to be useful. I'm going to be using pictures from these books in Tuesday's video. And then finally, aviation patches, fighter squadrons, strike fighter squadrons, and reconnaissance squadrons. All by Michael Roberts. It is a patchwork book. Yes, I do love that one. And look at some of these ones, these patches. Top Hatters, the Fighting 14. VF-14, yeah. Some of this artwork is really, really cool. And some of this artwork, you do not know how, you are so glad. This artwork, you can definitely appear in times before social media. You can tell. They are really cool books. It's a wonderful series. But as said, it is they are literally just patches. Listen, you missed this. Question 28. No, I didn't miss it. There's question 27, then there's question 29. There's no question 28. You didn't put an Alexander Clarke next to it. I did miss it. There you go. Which makes more sense to you for a larger Type 21 Amazon class? Roughly 6,000 tons or roughly 6,000 tons? It's going to be roughly 60,000 tons. It's going to depend on. I think probably the first one is probably closer because it's going to be adjusted, but it's not going to be exactly that. Okay. Right then. So, let's do questions for a bit longer. It's currently pouring with rain outside, so I'm going to stay in here for at least another 20 minutes. Maybe a little bit longer, answering questions. And, yeah. Then I will call it a night. As always, thank you everyone for your support. Thank you everyone for your kindness. And thank you everyone for sharing, subscribing, liking, commenting, chatting away. It all helps. Thank you to everyone who's a member, and thank you to everyone who's a patron. And thank you especially to those patrons who suggest and who vote, because, as said, you make my life just that much easier. And frankly, the YouTube money, as I call it, the YouTube money, the both patron and the money which comes from YouTube, the stuff which directly comes from YouTube, are going to be my only income over the next couple of months, and could well go into being my only income till October this year, with construction and all the other stuff going on. Because if construction of the properties lasts through June and setting them up, and then I won't get any other lecturing jobs in that time, and then honestly, it'll be off to Sweden, then back, and then it'll be summer. I might get I might do summer schools. Who knows? Justin Craig might need me for summer schools. It's always fun to do those. What are your thoughts on the sea control ship concept from the Cold War? Well, it's a good way to give a load of American officers an absolute flashbacks and trauma. If you want to see a American officer suffer from visible psychological trauma, you talk to anybody who was involved in sea control ship program concept, and you bring up the sea control ship. It actually doesn't work out that bad. It makes sense, but honestly, it's a little bit small in many ways for the operations and requirements. And the thing is, it was basically trying to build a CVE in peacetime. And the thing about a CVE is that you can justify in wartime because you need the numbers and the presence. But in peacetime, it's just not capable enough to justify the cost of building it. Because, think about it from this perspective. If I'm building a ship, what are the costs that are going to go into it guaranteed? Well, you might go, well, there's the hull size. That could be a big expense. But actually, steel, air, even armor, relatively speaking, are cheap. Things that are going to cost the money going into it are going to be the engines and mechanisms and electronics. Those are what are going to cost money. And it doesn't matter what size aircraft carrier you're going to need, they're going to be the same amount of electronics. And they're probably going to be the same spread of different types of mechanisms. Might have fewer of them, but you're still going to have them. You're going to need to sell the same electronics. And those are going to be big expenses. And then if you think about the engines, well, they're not actually going to be small either, because it's not going to be a small vessel. And then you've got all the training and all the other stuff which goes into supporting that vessel. And so in reality, cost-wise, if you're building big ships already, building another big ship is probably more cost-effective than building a small ship. Because you have to set up so many different things to support that small ship. The Williams, 4 weeks to get the Falklands will stop on the ascension. Yeah. Our Scandinavian is available yet? Not yet, but should be soon. Will you be at Chalk Valley this year, or will you be with the new house? Let me check the dates for Chalk Valley. I think for Chalk Valley, I could well be in Sweden. Yeah, I think I'm going to be in Sweden for that during Chalk Valley. Yeah, I think we could be in Sweden. I think we have roughly 24 days in Sweden, and I think that's the 15th to 9th, 15th of June to 9th of August. Nice turn around phone. Would a 5,600? Yeah, probably Seawolf. Probably a single Seawolf launcher forward, because they are the cheap frigate. That's probably what it'd be. Given that they now have Queen... Shumran, is there any navy that has designs for quick builds to start during heightening of tensions? Nope. They do a good game, but no one actually has it. Conor Cameron, given that they have now seen the QEs on operation, do you see the ESN incorporating some of the automated manpower reductions in designs going forward? The trouble with that is Congress and all sorts of other things. One of the problems for the US Navy is, and I will point to this, as I love the US Navy. They are a very good, very professional Navy. They have bought some of the automated systems, and one good example is the Zumwalt class, right? They have the automated system for boat launching, which usually means you do the boat launching with one person. There still rules require them to have the crew as if it's a manually operated system, not an automated system. So they have to have, I think it's 8 people standing by watching a boat launch, just waiting there while the boat's being launched. Now, yes, you have them there immediately if you need to take over and do it manually and manually haul the boat in. But, honestly, there is a better and more efficient use of personnel. And yes, you might need to call people up for that if there is a problem. But if there is a problem, it's either going to end very quickly in like 30 seconds with them dropping loose and heading into the water, in which case it's a very different mission recovery than it is that boat crew. Or they're going to be dangling there, and you've got time for people to come from where else they are in the ship to assist. and it's called your damage recovery team. You go into damage control you assemble a damage control party, and you have those people. You have the people for that. When Hungary ordered Leopard 2 in before 2022, and we realised that it took 2 years for Rheinmetall to take out a dozen from storage and refurbish them, uh, this is when the idea of the local factory for the KF-41 Lynx was born. Yeah, that's sensible. No idea on marching song, Stafford. Baron, what do you think about adding 5-inch or 3-inch guns to the Gerald 4 super carriers or Queenie and Elizabeth? You'd have to look. It's a lovely idea, and nicest way I would love the 3-inch guns or things on the Queen Elizabeth. I'd love to up their protection. A 3-inch gun, probably more than a 5-inch gun, would make most sense. But A, you've then got to include an entire new gun and training system into the Royal Navy, which isn't used anywhere else. And B, you've got to add that system onto the carrier, and you've got to sustain it on the carrier. Which means there are going to be spaces which you use for spare parts for other things, aren't going to be available for those other things. You've got to use up ammunition space to carry the ammunition, and you've got to add it in and all the personnel and all the things to support it. And the thing is, it's easier to design a ship from the get-go with those things than add those in later and then have to take things out to fit them. And I'm not sure if there's anything on the Queen Elizabeth I'd want to take out to include those things. I prefer to have just more Type 31 flak frigates to protect them, honestly. Nice one. If the Royal Navy had 14 County class and 7 York class of World War II, in the grand scheme of things, does it make any difference? Grand scheme of things, does it make any difference? Grand scheme of things, that's always an interesting question. Now, total of county class that were completed was 13. So you're saying if the Royal Navy has 21 rather than 13, so an extra 8 vessels overall, does that make any difference? Yes. And the reason it would make difference is in the sustainment of forces. In the presence of those forces, you would probably have a full fat county at the Battle of River Plate, which might mean the Battle of River Plate is an actual decided one. You're going to have more of those ships wandering around in other roles. You might be less likely to have supporting things like, let's say, the various armed merchant cruisers. There's going to be more cruisers available for that role to support up there. They might be upgraded more. There are lots of options for what having 21 ships rather than 13 means. If you have those 21 ships with the other existing forces available, you have a far stronger Royal Navy. You have 8 more cruisers in terms of numbers. And that includes 3 more full fat counties at the disposal of the Royal Navy, and 5 more Yorks. And as much as I do call the Yorks the cut price counties, the so many of the rude things, having 7 more ships is useful. They can take over areas. They can be supporting the Indian Ocean in 1940. They can be doing all sorts of missions. It's extra vessels, it's extra presence, it's extra capability. And that is a useful asset to have. Do I think they change things instantaneously? No. Do I think they change things in the aggregate? Yes. Is it a massive change? Probably not. Is it something which is going to be meaningful in terms of lives not lost? Yes. Because it's more presence. If you consider in the Royal Navy in World War II lost 3 of the county class. 3 county class vessels were lost. You have 21 instead of 13. Well, that 3 lost to be 1/7 instead of a quarter. That's going to be a difference. Maybe you lose more overall, though. Maybe, let's say, you lose 4 or 5. Even if you lose 5 out of 21, you still have 16 running around the world to carry out missions. You lose 3 of 13, you only have 10. Yeah, 30mm with Martlet missiles is probably more interesting. It would be very interesting, that one. I have to say, on the Martlet missiles, they've done a test with the Type 23s. It was successful, as Cartoon Man 154 has pointed out. But I would add, one of the reasons why it wasn't proceeded with is because they're not sure what... It's one of those things which is... how do I put this? In peacetime, it's going to be add more maintenance, add more issues. In wartime, it's a rapid change. So my own strong suspicion is there are probably somewhere sitting around somewhere a load of prefabbed units sitting in a warehouse to add the Martlet missiles to the 30mm. What book do I consider indispensable? Paul Amos. Oh, that's a cool book. And that's a leading supporter for 16 months. Thank you. No, for 16 months. What book do I consider indispensable? Andrew Lambert's Admirals is pretty much up there. British Historical Statistics comes out far more often than I ever thought it would when I bought it. I didn't expect to spend so much of my life pointing to this. But sometimes I have to just grab this out because people are going, Britain's broke in this period. And you go, actually, let's look at the statistics. We're not broke. We're a long way from broke. You are reading a historical narrative which has been formed over many years from people's perceptions, but it's not actually truth, and it wasn't actually believed at the time. But yeah, Admirals. Andrew Lambert's Admirals. And... That's pretty much indispensable. Every book is useful. Sailor's Odyssey by Andrew Cunningham is pretty darn good, and Vian's book are also pretty darn good. But Admirals has been a starting point for me for many things. Andrew loves Admirals. Cartoon Man 154. Okay, flame too near the door. That's kind of like some of the instructions on World War I battleship turrets, etc. There are peacetime rules for how to operate them. Don't fire them over each other if they're super firing, because it can damage. If it's got sighting systems, etc., through the roof, it can cause damage. So you don't do that in peacetime. You don't fire across deck in peacetime, because you're going to cause a lot of damage, which is going to be expensive to fix if something goes wrong, and you can't justify that in peacetime. But in wartime, okay, don't care. Scorch marks on the door. As long as it's not going to actually, they're not going to actually break the door steel or actually damage the door to the extent that it can't, warp the door to the extent it can't be used for NBC reasons or nuclear, biological, chemical protection, you are fine. They're not going to worry about it. And as far as I know, it wasn't at that level. I could be wrong. But as far as I know, it wasn't at that level. But the thing is, it causes enough annoyance damage and enough cost, and in peacetime, you're not going to do that. You're not going to run those risks in peacetime. And this is one of the reasons why it's so much fun when sometimes I'm looking at books and people are going, well, this gun could not be fired over, this super firing gun could not be fired over the gun below. Hang on, I know of battles where it was actually done, so what do you mean it could not be fired? And then you go references and check reference. It's the thing is, it is this is operating during testing and testing and exercises. You are not allowed to fire guns over in this position. Okay. That's not the same thing as you can't do it in wartime. In wartime, you fire the guns, you sink the enemy. The ends justify the means, or rather, the ends justify the cost. The potential cost and the real cost, whatever that may be. But in peacetime, turn around and go, so you were firing at a target, yeah, and you managed to bust up the sighting mechanism on the turret below, yeah, and have cost us how much money? Yeah. Because it's not necessary in peacetime, because in peacetime, you are going through the motion and testing fire on a target. You're not, in the nicest way, it doesn't matter what angle you're firing the gun at. It's all going to be the same process. As long as you hit the target, it doesn't matter. But you don't fire directly over the ship because you can avoid it. You can avoid it, you know. Yeah, my Volvo's doing fine. Let's see everyone. Why aren't the demise of the guided missile destroyer Sheffield Coventry and guided missile more significant than they are as their first DG and FG ever sunk in war? Honestly, because it's the Falklands War. The Falklands War is Britain versus Argentina. So a lot of people might throw off as, oh, it's a peer versus near peer power. It's a peer versus near peer conflict. It's not a peer on peer conflict or all sorts of things. It's an interesting scenario. I would also say that quite a lot of people doing the brushing off are the fact that the British don't tend to study their victories, and other people don't tend to study don't tend to study British wars. But there again, there are a fair amount of studies done on the Falklands War, and it is quite significant in planning and discussion circumstances. But also the other problem is now it's 40 years ago. We are as far from the Falklands. We are actually further from the Falklands War now than the Falklands War was from World War II. We are further from the Falklands War than the Falklands War was from World War II. Think about that. Next one. What is it about a missile magazine explosion that makes it so lethal to a modern warship? Because it's so much explosive and fuel going off. In a nice way, those things are designed. If those things go boom, you have a major problem. That's a lot of explosive and a lot of things going off. And let's be honest, magazine explosions have never been good for any warship. Doesn't matter whether modern or old or whatever they are. They've always been lethal. No? Just, there's, if I remember correctly, the USS Maine is a good example of what happens when the magazine detonates. That sounds like a cool book, Phil Williams. Trident's a solid fuel system, I think, from memory. Let me check. Yeah, it's a solid fuel rocket. Black Master's Trident is a solid fuel rocket. So about another 10 minutes we'll be chatting for. There's a lot of stuff going on in live chat today. What's my chat rate mode? I've got a chat rate of 6. Goodness gracious me, that's almost the highest I've ever been. Highest I've ever had was a chat rate of 10. So a chat rate of 6 is great. Thank you. Apparently they promote lives based on chat rate, although that doesn't mean I want the chat to suddenly be spammed with lots of things in it, because that would just disturb me on many levels. Also, I'm apologising if I keep playing with my ear. I'm not sure. I've managed to somehow hurt my ear. It got infected or something, and it's got cream on it and things, and it feels weird because the cream's I've had to put the cream in, and I keep yeah. It's just weird having cream in your ear, okay? And before anyone asks, yes, it's antiseptic cream. It was rubbed in, but it just feels weird. Makes me play with my ear more often than not because it just feels strange. And I shouldn't play with it, I know, but yeah. Being told about it, but just apologising for it. Is there a similar story in Naval history as to War Daddy scuttling his own tank because he didn't want it back and was given? Not usually. No one, I think, has scuttled a ship. No, I don't think anyone has. I don't think. I'm reading the actual story of him scuttling his own. No. Honestly, no. No. Although, the fact that I've now realised that Lafayette G. Poole, aka War Daddy, had 8 children is, yeah, that... Yeah. Can see why I got the title War Daddy. 8 children. Flanco. Hello. I've been looking over the Iron's pre-World War II heavy cruiser designs, and despite never being ordered, there are so many admiral names. Is there any source to back up this idea or just an invention? It's kind of like the saint names for the N3s, Falanco. Volcano. There are people who go, well, they must have they must be going to use admiral names for this. Admiral names tend to be used for capital ships, not cruisers. There have occasionally been there's also the idea of HMS Blake post World War II, but again, I don't think so. I don't think the Royal Navy was likely to go for that. I think, especially as they're counting it, what they might have used in terms of naming history with cruisers, they had gone through the Greek names, then they got into the towns, which have gone back to the town names again, constituency names. There are a few other options to go with, so it's more likely to be Greek names, and that's that old Royal Navy standby, or various other names than it is to be admiral names. Duke class is another popular one, so it could have well have been a Duke class. Listen, out of the King George V designs with 8 or 9 or 10 or 12 Okay. So, you basically want to take a King George V design, which has up to 12 12-inch guns, and 2 quintuple or 4 triple torpedo tubes would have been the basis for a large cruiser. You've got to give me a range of designs and there are options of them. B, I don't think any of them would be the basis for a large cruiser, because fundamentally the hull design I wanted for a large cruiser will be different than you want for a King George than for a battleship. So you're looking probably more at the Vanguard hull design, maybe the Lion class hull design, not the King George V hull design. For a cruiser, because honestly, the King George V is not designed to be for a cruiser roll hull. Next one, question 35. Is it wrong to think that with 4,000 plus ton Type 12 service? I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Cheap ship built with what it had, plus a 4.5-inch gun? Potentially, but potentially not. Potentially they don't even need it. Or potentially they build it very differently. Possibly an unanswered question, but given the propensity of the UK population to mount old, heavy equipment on roundabouts act, what is the most historic piece of ship construction tech used like this? Oh, good. Honestly, it is. There is some very interesting stuff in Scotland and in Liverpool, but I'm not sure whether it was ship construction stuff or stuff from heavy industry. So I'm not really sure I can answer that one. And not the cranes, no. Next turn, question 36. Compared to the other dreadnought battleships of their time, how good were the Gunga class? They were viable. They're decent ships. They're not brilliant. They're not going to set the world on fire, but they're also not ships which you're going to knock over without sending in your own big dreadnought. Basically, they're big enough, powerful enough, and heavy enough that you aren't going to knock them over with a cruiser. You are going to have to send in your own dreadnoughts to win. And honestly, you're probably going to have to send a couple to guarantee that win, because they've got enough guns they can potentially cause damage. Would it be accurate? Would it be accurate that by the end of the 1920s, had the Imperial Russian Empire not collapsed, that the Ganguts would be up for replacement? Yes. Whether they could replace them or not is a completely different matter. Black Maximus, was there any design studies looking into successors for the 1906 Minotaur class cruisers besides battle cruisers? Yeah, there were. There were heavy cruiser projects. They just didn't build them because, whilst the battle cruisers were 20,000 plus tons, 25,000 tons, they were fine to build in enough numbers. And the thing is, you had the large numbers of light cruisers and the ever-growing number of light cruisers to make up for that disparity. Once you start getting to battle cruisers which are 40,000 plus tons, you're never going to build them in enough numbers to do all the jobs you need a large cruiser for. So that's the point at which you start looking at, again, the roughly 15 to 20,000 ton cruiser. Are there any notable Royal Navy captains from modern who never got their stars? Yes, but some of them have been rectified now. You have to remember Michael Clarke, who was the Amphibious Task Group commander in 1982, was a Commodore, but it's a Commodore pedant because the Royal Navy didn't actually have the rank of Commodore established in 1982. So he retired as a captain, but it was rectified as far as I understand it. So he is now a Commodore on the retirement list and is appropriately supported for his status and rank and duty. Right then, it is 3 minutes towards the end, so I'm going to end the questions in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Wait for it to show up on the screen. And then I'm going to say, oh, good lord, make sure I did answer all these, because sometimes I missed them. Did do that one, that one, that one. I did all of them, so thank you. And if I go to live chat, thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, everyone, and take care. Any questions in the live chat, which I should mention, HS Candleton. Yeah, that's not meant in that way, no. Of the War Daddy. Yeah. Oh, Freeman, Dan will never do that. In the nicest way. The more the trouble is, he's going to have the fact is that if it keeps going on, I'm going to have to be persuaded to actually go to a doctor to get it checked out, and that's the thing. If it keeps going on, if it causes me pain for too long, that's the more difficult thing, to persuade me to actually go to a medical doctor. Oh, who knows? Carl spoke. Who knows what type of 83 will go. Thank you, Phil Williams. Thank you, Ins Morrison. Thank you, Tashi Vishal. Thank you, Seneca Nero. Thank you, Alzaski. Thank you to Brock. Thank you, Colin Cameron, Just Fonk. Thank you, everyone who's watching. Leslie Mitchell, Graham Highlander, Phil Williams, Cartoon Man 154. Thank you, everyone who's joined us this evening. Who's been chatting away for some time. I think was probably the first time. Blackbird Maximus, Stafford, of course, Dan, Paul, Seneca Nero, all the people who've been adminning. Thank you. Teamy Locker, thank you. Just Fonk, thank you. Drakenred, thank you. Blackbird Maximus, DJ40, thank you. Alzaski, DeBrock, thank you. Thank you, everyone who's been watching. Jacob, thank you. Atros Verdun, thank you. Megascrow, Tanafelka, Danny Wright, thank you. Everyone who's been watching, everyone who's hopefully been having a good time and has had their questions and everything else answered that they've asked. Thank you very much for asking. Thank you very much for joining. Hope you enjoyed, and take care, and hope to see you again, maybe Thursday or Sunday. And hope you enjoyed the videos. Tomorrow, I do apologize. Okay, I've apologized in the video, and I apologize again. I basically had a brain fart while recording. That's a brain fart while recording. The lovely. The video on the A5M, and I managed to confuse up my slides and everything. And this was because when I was finishing off his recording and re-recording, because I knew I needed to re-record it because I didn't like it, I had just got off the phone to the lawyers talking through conveyancing and all sorts of that fun. And for those who don't realise, I realized what can happen when I start talking academese to people, because frankly the lawyers was talking in a completely different language, and I kept having to go, can you explain that in English? Can you explain that in English? Okay, I'm going to sound dense, but can I explain this in English, please? And I managed to get through it all, but my brain was buzzing with that, and I managed to get my Japanese biplane fighters confused. So thank you for the I think it was Carmen Gasberg who pointed out, and then I went, oh, forget, and re-recorded it all. Sorted it all out, and it goes up tomorrow. And it's now going to be even longer because I noticed bits I'd actually recorded hadn't been included in the video. So not only had I recorded bits wrong, I'd edited it together bits wrong, because bits which were supposed to be in there about the things like the construction of the actual aircraft's skin, etc., were wrong, or rather hadn't been included. So thank you very much for that. Hope you enjoyed, and yeah, it was fun. Had a brain fart. It's when you go completely wrong with your when your brain doesn't work properly and instead just lets out hot air, which doesn't have any value and smells pretty whiffy. That's a brain fart. People have them occasionally. Even everyone has them occasionally, and you apologise for it. Dutov Dubbock, thank you. Thank you very much, everyone. Take care and have fun. Toodles. And we do that one.